Holy shit, we got a lot of news over the last 24 hours in regards to Wrath of the Lich King Classic. You know, great time to be launching a Wrath of the Lich King Classic podcast that I, dropped episode 1 on you just a few days ago, guys. Now we got this absolute cavalcade of information. And as we know with Blizzard, with this stuff, the information comes in relatively, intermittent bursts. We don't hear from them all the time, but we got a lot of stuff to discuss now. And I'm so glad that I've got some people gathered here at the last second. I just woke up an hour ago. I've barely digested everything that we've heard. It's all happening. Words are being thrown around like dungeon boosting and beta and fucking experience buffs and all this stuff. Who better to break it down with than this countdown crew I've assembled? And first and foremost, you all know him. You all love him. North, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. It's nice to have a distraction from all the Floridian humidity. I'll say that I've got my nice ice cold Modelo here, another glass of water because one beer's not enough. I'm feeling fantastic. We've gotten some fucking amazing news. I'm really, really excited. You know, I've been on my optimistic grind, my hopium grind lately, and this is more good news, right? More in the right direction. We were taking steps where we need to be taking them, and it's great to see.
It is great to see. And, as you say, it is just so much to discuss. So guys, strap in. This could be 2 hours long. We'll see how we go. But definitely great to see. And joining us, multiple appearances on the show in the past for sure. You all should remember him. Discord regular. We love him. Gigantor. Mate, how are you?
Doing well. I'm super excited.
Very, very good. I'm sure you're raring to go. There's a bunch of stuff to discuss. And not finally, because we'll get one more person in here. But for now, literally the first time, long time meme does apply here. Cirrhosis, mate, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for the invites. Nice to join. Yeah.
It's great to have you here. I really do. I'm not like sort of just saying it just to say it, mate. I really enjoy getting first timers in here, people who do say, and it comes up every now and again, Josh, I've been listening to the show for years. It's great to, be able to get in on a call for once. Love talking to you guys. It's always fun. I'm sure we're going to have a blast. Guys, I'll just get in, 2 more people who want to join us. So just bear with me. Ryan, can you hear me?
Hey, Josh. Yeah, I can hear you.
Thanks so much for joining in, mate. I appreciate it.
So good, mate. Thanks for the invite.
Mate, all good. I know you want to talk about the OCE stuff. We'll definitely get there, but mate, obviously more than welcome to join in on all the things that we'll be talking about. So we'll get an opinion from everyone. But, guys, let's get cracking. I've got one person coming as well, but they'll be here in a second. Look, let's go through this chronologically because, it's really 3 massive announcements that we're discussing here. So the first in time, and there were 2 that we got back to back, right next to each other yesterday afternoon, Sydney time. And, that's Wednesday afternoon, I should say, Sydney time. And this was a post from Blizzard about a summer XP buff event. And basically what we've been told is that there is a huge, buff coming to experience throughout the game in the lead up to Wrath of the Lich King Classic launch. We're getting 50% additional experience through all forms of experience, not just, quests. We're getting mobs as well, 50% extra for everyone for a period of at least 6 to 8 weeks, which will begin a few weeks before the pre-patch, whenever that might come. Now, kind of interesting to break down on this one because the additional information, perhaps the one that really stands out, is that this experience buff is also going to apply to the recently announced Fresh Realms, which was the juicy, interesting, discussion-worthy morsel for me. And trust me, we'll get there. But actually, North, fuck you. I'm not going to start with you. Let's start with someone new. Cirrhosis, mate, let me begin with you. What was your reaction when you saw this experience buff news?
Yeah, so I guess like a lot of people's guilds, as soon as they announced the fresh servers coming live, predominantly everybody's like, yeah, let's do that. And I'm always, I can never understand the fresh like motive. Whenever someone goes, I want to reroll a new server and start again, I'm like, I don't really want to lose all my time. But when they announced the 50% like extra experience, I was like, well, I guess it won't be that bad then. So for me, that's solidified. Happy to go fresh with that experience buff. So that's all welcome in my end.
Okay, so it's good news for you. Gigantor, how did you feel when you saw this particular news?
I gotta say I was confused at first and conflicted because as someone, I am a casual. I have to state that. And normally you think I would love this, but it's kind of put me in a crossroads because whenever I think of fresh, I'm kind of thinking of, okay, it's going to be the original route, same difficulty to get to 70. But I don't know why I feel so conflicted, but I gotta say it just doesn't feel right.
Okay, feels a little bit weird for you. Ryan, how did you feel?
Oh, look, I was shocked when I first heard it. I had to process it for a while. But when you think about going into Wrath, you don't actually get an XP buff for 1 to 60. It's only 60 to 70. So I don't know if a lot of people forget that. So the fact that they did this, especially for Fresh Realms, you know, there's great leveling experiences in Classic, but once you've done it 6 or 7 times, it kind of wears short. So I think it's fantastic that they did this.
All right. Arcos, thank you so much for joining us. You and I have been meaning to link up for some time. I'm glad we finally got you in here. Mate, welcome to the show, and we're discussing reactions to the experience boost news. Tell us, how did you feel when you first read that one yesterday?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, first off. You can hear me fine, right?
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Yeah, I mean, today news, yesterday news, like it's just been so much. It's a little bit hard to wrap your head around like every single detail that's come out. The experience boost, what was it, like 50%? I don't think that's right for Fresh Realms, to be honest. I think the people who want to play the Fresh, they don't want to get some crutch to lean on, I think.
Okay, very good. Look, North, mate, let's dig into this one, and obviously we'll get your reaction as well, but we'll kick off the meaty part of the conversation with this particular point, because I agree with what Arcos has said. I feel conflicted about the experience buff when it comes to all realms. I completely understand that this is going to, divide the community in twain. There will be just as many people who think this is fantastic as there will who are like, I don't know about this. But then that dividing in twain kind of becomes a different story when we focus on the Fresh realm, because I feel like, I don't know. I want to guess and say that more people would say that.
Why does everything have to be divisive?
Well,
right?
it doesn't.
Why is this at all? Like, what is your, right? Like, you're saying you're conflicted. Why are you conflicted? What about this?
I'm conflicted because I can't tell if I would enjoy this or not sorry, let me scratch that. In regards to all realms, I would probably lean more towards this being a good thing. Okay, the game has been around for a long time. If we're talking about the players that have played this game for some time, yes, the idea of leveling up another alt at the original experience rates is a little bit nauseating. I understand that. Hooray, fantastic. But then we get into all the convoluted arguments about, well, what about the new players coming in for Wrath? And it's not so much they have to go through the trials and tribulations that I went through. They should have to level at the same rates. But I do feel like it waters down the experience a little bit if a new player comes to Wrath and wants to catch up with their friends and they are not zooming through the leveling experience, but, going through it at a much faster rate. I'm happy to be shouted down on that one, but I get far more prickly when we do focus in on the Fresh realm aspect, because I am of the belief, and again, you're right, not everything has to be divisive, and we absolutely live in a world where, Blizzard can't win. No matter what they fucking announce, they're going to have dickheads like me on a podcast like this, absolutely saying, I don't know about this one, blah, blah, blah. But obviously, we're also not going to live in a universe where we just sit by and blindly praise every announcement that they give us. I mean, we're here for critical thinking, so let's critically think. And when I talk about boosted experience on the Fresh realm, that's where, like I said, I get far more prickly, where I agree with Arcos. I don't think boosted experience should come with a fresh realm experience. I think that more than waters down what they're getting, I think it completely changes the delivery of the product. And even though, again, I don't care as much because I'm not playing on the fresh realm, so I can only get so invested in this argument. For the people that are playing on the fresh realm, I would have thought that fresh, and you're a fresh, I was going to use a bad word, but you know what I mean. You are a devotee of the fresh experience. No,
I am
you're a fresh harlot.
Historian of the fresh experience.
A fresh harlot. That's a better
historian of the fresh experience and an enthusiast in all things FREsh with spaces in between. Let me dispel your worry. This is amazing.
Okay.
Right. There is absolutely no issue with this at all. This is fantastic in literally every way. And it shouldn't be divisive at all. Everyone should universally laud this. And here's why. This makes less people use the boost. Sure, not on the fresh, that's not as relevant. I'll get to the fresh in a moment, but on the old realms, less people are going to use the boost because of this. More people are going to level up with their friends in preparation for Wrath, and that makes a more seamless experience where people aren't using the boost. Obviously, right, like if we're going to pick and choose here, I don't think the boost should exist at all. Right. I don't think the boost should exist. I dislike it's, we've hashed that out a million times. I dislike the boost for sure. But that's, it's there, and that's not really the designer's fault. That's not really the engineers. I don't really think that they can get that out. And so what they've done is okay, how do we then mitigate the effect of this? How do we encourage people to do it naturally? How do we encourage people to interact with the world? One of those ways is by making a fresh realm where people can't use the boost. The other way is by giving a real reason, giving a real incentive for people to do it in a less painful way. And people are going to do it. And for on the fresh realm, as much as it's like, this sabotage. No, it doesn't. Every fresh in Wrath, every fresh that has been good in TBC, with one exception, literally one exception, has boosted XP rates because people don't want to slog through the old content, right? And 50% is really, it's not that much. Most of these realms are 2x, 3x in the old content because people, as much as it is, kind of interesting content, it's a lot more interesting when it doesn't feel like a slog, when you do feel like you're kind of ripping through the levels, and 50% is enough where it's going to feel fast, but it's not going to happen in a day. You're not going to level up, unless you're really, really hardcore. You're not going to level up 1 to 16 a day.
That's where I'll jump in and press you. I'll jump in and press you a little bit just on that point, mate. And then I'll throw it open to the other guys to see if anyone agrees or disagrees with you, because my eyes do kind of light up a little bit. It's not that I disagree with you, but I do sit back and just ponder it for a moment. When you say that this will dissuade people from jumping on the boost a little bit more if they've got this, elevated experience buff going on. And, on paper, of course, what you're saying makes sense. Yes, it does diminish the boost a little bit. People get hours cut off their leveling experience. They'd be more inclined to level and play the game. However, in practice, I actually wonder whether that will be the case, because we're still talking about new players coming to the game and looking down and going, okay, without the boost, let's say, it's going to take me 100 to 120 hours to get to 70. Fucking, I don't know, whatever, something in that realm, right? This boost is a 50% experience buff. It's not twice as much experience. It's 50% extra. So let's say, I don't know, we knock 20 to 30 hours off of my leveling journey. I'm still looking at about, 70, 80 hours worth of adventuring to 70. What portion of the population is going to look at that situation? And I just see more people sort of getting about 10, 15 hours in going, yay, fun, fresh, and still being as inclined to go, you know what, after all, fuck this, I'll just buy the boost.
Well, but, in the fresh realm, obviously that's not relevant. And that might still happen, right? Like, it might still happen that people are just like, hey, this is not for me. And those people were going to buy the boost if they didn't try that, right? So you have more people in that early experience running those early dungeons, doing those early things. So you have the old world then brought to life. Maybe it's temporary, right? Maybe it's only temporary. Maybe it's a small amount, but more people are going to do that. And I know that you understand that intuitively. More people are at least are going to try it. It's going to attract more people because there's a special event. Yep. And special events always do stuff like this, right? Unless it's so awful, but it's a compelling event. First of all. Second of all, my understanding is this is going to be like right before pre-patch, but for fresh as well, it's going to be sort of in pre-patch zone. What that means is that 60 to 70 is also pretty heavily reduced in terms of XP numbers, whereas the slog in leveling is from 60 to 70. If we're going to be perfectly honest, yes,
the question 100%, absolutely.
Like the slog at 60 to 70, 50% increase with the Wrath reduction in 60 in the XP in that range is you're gonna rip, right? Like it's not gonna be slow. It's gonna feel good. And yeah, people are still gonna use the boost, but on the fresh realms, it's gonna reduce a giant barrier to entry that people are, I forget who said it, but they were like, oh, well, I wasn't interested in the fresh, but now, right, it's looking like less of a barrier to entry. It's lowering the barrier to entry. And that is the real problem, with having a fresh alongside these realms where people are established. The barrier to entry looks kind of high because it's like, oh, I have to sink in all this time, right? I can't boost it up. I can't transfer it. I have to do it all over again. 50% faster on top of the Wrath changes that reduce the amount of time in TBC. It's comprehensively shorter, and it's going to mean more people. It's going to mean a more vibrant experience.
All right. You've started off the game. You've hit 10 points in the first 4 minutes. You're on fire. I'm going to make a weird coaching decision and say, you know what? You're playing too well, North. Hit the bench for 5 minutes, and we're going to throw it out to the crowd. Guys, first in, best dressed. Everything that North and I have just gone back and forth on, I want to hear your thoughts, but sort of starting around this whole, do you guys believe that, and North is right to point out, yes, obviously on the fresh realms, you can't buy the boost. So that's an irrelevant point. More talking about the other servers. But do you think this experience buff will lead to more people jumping in and doing the leveling experience again and avoiding the boost? And also, what are your thoughts on particularly that key point of the marriage of the experience buff and a fresh start realm? Who wants to kick us off?
Oh, I could just share a conversation I had with one of my friends just literally a couple of hours ago after the announcement. And that was, I sold it to him. Why don't you come back with French with me? You only have to do half their leveling now, effectively. And I think you're going to get a lot of people convince their friends that were on the fence now to come back. So you're not only going to have newers continuing, but you're going to have newers friends coming back as well. It's just amazing for that kind of social experience as well.
Very good. You other guys, let me ask, are you celebrating this? I don't know. How many of you are thinking of actually playing on the fresh realm?
I'm definitely going to play fresh, but if I do attack this from a different angle, the biggest reason I'm excited for fresh is the new economy that comes with a fresh server. And the bonus XP is what kind of conflicts me about joining now, because that's going to accelerate the progress of the server, how fast it evolves. And I really want to see a slow evolving server, to everyone else's dismay.
If I could jump in there for a second, it doesn't actually, in my experience with fresh servers, obviously it's not comprehensive, especially, my Wrath experience is not that comprehensive, but, it especially does not come into contact, like the progression as much with a fresh, because when you've gated, like the content up to 70, it doesn't actually roll in with that, as easily. Can you stop shouting, please? Please stop shouting. So the problem that you run into with these servers is that you're all gate kept to 70 anyway. How fast you get there? Yes, you can have like a more more green hills of Stranglethorn will be on if you don't have 50% XP bonus, because people will be, like annoyed and have to, like they'll be trying way harder to actually get that XP. But realistically, it's not going to affect it because the Wrath XP is not going to be affected, right? And since the Wrath XP is not going to be affected, the entire economy kind of throws away almost everything in TBC and Wrath. Like that's just how like the early expansions, that's how like kind of Wrath on works. And so you're not really going to see that impact. Instead, what I think that you will see is more vibrant economy ultimately, because more people will be willing to actually roll on it, right? So you see more interaction with the economy, which is ultimately a good thing. That's the experience that I've had anyway.
All right. You're benched. Hey, put your fucking sneakers, take your sneakers off, all right?
I'm throwing elbows, Josh.
Unfortunately, I couldn't agree more with North here. I wanted him to be the one with the least amount of arguments, but he's right, 100% right. We had an XP nerf going into TBC of 30%. So the people that are opposed to this or not feel a little bit uneasy about the 50%, how did you feel going into TBC? And then my next thing is, who do you think this is targeting? They're going after the private server, the Wrath players. They always play on increased XP. Every Wrath private server release, it's always in increased amount. And it's also aimed at the people who are already boost locked. They've already bought a boost in TBC. And now they have to level through dungeons or through the open world. Now they're more incentivized.
I agree with you, mate. And anyone but North jump in on this one that I'm about to say. Look, I immediately had some DMs with some friends and listeners straight after this news came out and said, look, yes, it's something that absolutely can be celebrated. I get that. And I think you're right to say that, Ryan, and North's right to bring that out as well. I'm just trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, guys. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm shitting on this. Like I said, I'm more pro this news in regards to all the other servers, but I'm a bit sour on it when it comes to the Fresh server. But on the whole, it's very clear to me in a way why this is being done. Personally, I don't think this is tinfoil to say. I mean, Blizzard has every aspiration of Wrath being a very fucking big deal. No shit, Josh. When people release games, that's generally the plan. True. But they know Wrath brings a certain amount of, cachet with it. And they think that this could be, maybe as big as Classic launch. I don't think it will be quite as big, but it's going to be a big deal. So the big hook for them is appealing to retail players who traditionally have, turned their nose up at Classic and been like, no, that's not for me. I don't give a fuck about it. Obviously, there's a lot of retail players that started in Wrath, the Wrath babies. This is their Classic. What we got in 2019, this is their version of that in 2022. They're like, whoa, Classic Wrath? That's when I got my origin story. Fantastic. I might be more interested in now. But then when you posit the scenario to a retail player of, hey, you remember how the leveling experience was actually kind of long in Classic? And obviously they get something drastically different in retail now. They might balk a little bit at that notion and go, oh, well, fuck, I just kind of want to play the end game or whatever. Like I want to zip through leveling. What would interest me. So I'm of the belief that we're getting this increased, experience buff because they really need to, for their sake of their bottom line, interest and retain the retail players. And this is a way to do that. Again, not a huge deal in regards to the other servers. I don't give a fuck. But I think in sacrificing the fresh experience that the Classic players are generally interested in is a little bit weird to me. Like I said, there is a class of people and North won't be able to answer this, but I'll touch on it a little bit. That North well knows is very interested in the fresh experience. And he's right to bring out that some private servers do, double experience rates, triple experience rates, blah, blah, blah. But I think for the most part, a lot of the appeal of a fresh server is going through that grind together and doing all the dungeons together. When you accelerate the experience, now you might be skipping a few dungeons. Now you might be skipping a couple of zones, a few quests that you would have ordinarily done that you might, know and love. So it puts you on that faster treadmill that I think slightly waters down the whole thing to the point of affecting, your overall enjoyment. That's just my take. You guys might disagree. Anyone whose name is not North, tell me if you agree or disagree with anything I've just said.
You are correct when you say that, Josh. For 2 dungeon quests, you're getting 3 dungeon quests worth of XP with the 50% increase. So you definitely do find yourself skipping a lot. But on the other hand, would those people have come back and grinded and re-leveled without the 50% incentive?
Yep, good point. Arcos, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was asking if I could jump in here. I think, I'm kind of in the same camp as you. I think they're just throwing everything in the kitchen sink at bringing people in, no matter if they're retail players, private server players, whatever. Like I posted earlier today, talking to someone in your Discord.
Yeah, please tell us about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the past 2 fiscal years, so the fiscal year for 2020 and 2021, Blizzard and only Blizzard has lost 5 million monthly active users. Of course, that's over multiple games, but this game is one of those. And I think this is like the fresh servers, the 50% off, the discounts, the midsummer discounts for boosts, etc. It's all just aimed at bringing people back to paying a monthly sub and playing the game. It doesn't really matter, I think, from where those people come, if they come from private servers or retail or elsewhere. But I 100% agree, just lowering the barrier to entry, it's going to make a lot of people who had considered playing but decided not to actually do it now. It's going to make a lot of the Wrath Lich King babies, as we call them, think, okay, this is the time for me. Like it's even easier than beforehand. Yeah, I think they're just throwing everything at getting as many people playing as they can. And if you actually do the math on subs, like, I don't think transfers are a drop in the bucket when you consider subs for the amount of people that are playing, even just Classic.
Well, Arcos, I don't want you to sell yourself short, mate, because I'm happy to go into a little bit more of what you mentioned along with that post in the show's Discord, because I thought it was and you'll have to remind me, mate, I'm pretty sure it was you and it was an extension of this post, because I thought it was fantastic. You threw it out there as maybe being a bit of a tinfoil hat theory, and I said, I don't think that's tinfoil at all. But everything that you've just said is right. And it's also not controversial. Obviously, games and companies want to drive, they want to drive their business. They want to do everything they can in their power to encourage subs, to encourage inviting people back to a new game launch and increase the monthly active user rate and all of that stuff. That's not shocking or controversial in any way, shape or form. Yes, let's do everything in our power to do so. However, I really liked your added point about the consideration of the Microsoft merger and also a potential Bobby Kotick exit. This was also in your post, wasn't it, mate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can just set you up, I really thought this was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it's very, very good, to share this on the show. I won't take the words out of your mouth, but basically you were saying, I'll lob it over the plate so you can hit it out of the park, mate. You were saying that this piranha-like frenzy of activity in the water right now with Blizzard, where we got this huge news yesterday. Yeah, it's not really news maybe, but like, I'm thinking it might be a placeholder date, but this potential news that Dragonflight is launching this year is fucking outrageous. And it set the world alight on Twitter and whatnot. And then we got the news about the experience buff and the fucking boost is on sale and blah, blah, blah. Blizzard just threw the house at us. Tell us why you think that's relevant.
Yeah. So, if you read the financial statement for Activision Blizzard for the past year, the year of 2021, you can see, for example, that Blizzard has lost a lot of monthly active users, as they call them, while Activision and King have either increased or stayed kind of steady. But my tinfoil theory was that they are throwing everything at just getting in as much revenue as they possibly can before this fiscal year ends. Because as well in the financial statement, they say that the intention of selling the company to Microsoft Corporation, the intention is for that to finish before Microsoft's fiscal year finishes in 2023, which is, I think, in June. So what that kind of tells me is that by the end of this fiscal year, those financial numbers are the ones that will be talked about when dealing with final prices for the takeover. So that, for example, Q1 of 2023 for Activision Blizzard will not be necessarily as heavily influential. This, I think, mostly because they're throwing out an expansion for retail in this year, before the end of this year, which, like you said, is outrageous. I feel like they decided to do that because of this. As well, to go further in the tinfoil hat
please,
territory,
this is the best part.
My thoughts were, and I think I'm correct in saying that either during COVID or just before COVID, Bobby Kotick was awarded a $200 million bonus or something, but then because of community outcry, he gave half of it back or something. I'm not sure if that eventually happened or not, but I kind of feel like I read the headlines on that. But he has owned Activision since, I think, 1990 or 1991, and they of course took over Blizzard in the early 2000s. When Microsoft takes over, it's a full cash deal for 100% of the ownership, as far as I understand it, which would mean that Bobby Kotick would no longer be an owner in the company. So for me, this is the wrath of the rich king. He is going to do everything he can to pump up revenue, to pump up profit margins and profits. Because
you said that you wouldn't be shocked if he has basically performance payouts tied to the stock price at the time of the handover. Is that right?
Yeah, so incentives to hand over the company in as good of a financial manner as possible, and that's not uncommon in any business transaction when companies are either merging or being taken over. The better the financial health of that company at the moment of takeover or when that deal is being dealt, the more lucrative those deals will be, those bonuses will be. And it's not just for him, of course, it's other higher ups at the company as well, I would expect, are getting like baseline bonuses for performance. But as you can also see in the financial statement, the GAAP profit margin for the whole corporation is 37%. Personally, I feel it's quite a bit. Like they had about $8 billion in revenue, and if 37% of that is profit after all expenses, 37%, that's a lot of money. I would expect him to bag a lot if they keep that growing before the Microsoft transaction. So
I love it.
It all ties up to this, throwing everything out like this, 50% experience, fresh servers, new expansion in classic, new expansion in retail.
I love this take.
It's a lot of new stuff for Blizzard.
I love it so much. North, let me tag you in real quick. Just let me say, when you hear, I think you're somewhat of a tinfoil admirer in a ways. I personally really love that concept of Bobby throwing the kitchen sink at us prior to his exit to ensure that his payout is absolutely maximized, maybe rushing products in a I don't give a fuck way just to make sure his check is as big as it can be. Do you think that holds any water, or it's a bit too tinfoily for you?
Here's my hopium, honestly, and here's my please stop shouting. Stop.
Mom!
Anyway, I take a different perspective here, and it's both aligned with my worldview, and I think a little more hopeful, and it's not that Bobby Kotick was sitting on all these great ideas, and that now he's letting the floodgates out because he's improved. Now he's making the good decisions because he didn't want to make the good ones before. I think, right? This is my personal opinion on this. I think that there's a lot of merit to these ideas, but I think that he's more willing, because of the failures of Blizzard in the past few years, as well as coupling with that he needs to put Blizzard in the best state that it is, and I agree with that, like that entire premise, completely on board with, that he's letting the teams have some degree of autonomy. And I've seen it with, the Blizzard employees that I know, that I'm familiar with. All of them lately are very happy. You've seen that, right, Josh? Like all of them seem very happy with their teams, with the environments, with what they're being. So I think that the engineers are ultimately being enabled because Bobby doesn't know what else to do. And now shocker, the last ditch effort on the eve of his departure is, God forbid, to let the people who know how to make the games make the fucking games. So that's my tinfoil hat.
Very good.
That's my counter tinfoil hat for you.
Okay. Let me throw it out to you other guys. Let's see here. Who haven't we heard from? Cirrhosis, mate. Let me throw it over to you. We'll ditch the tinfoil hat talk. Thanks for that, Arcos. I do like going down the financial avenue every now and again. Cirrhosis, mate. Just to tie off on this experience bonus, I guess the final thing I'll really hone in on is, when I say something like, do you feel that a 50% experience buff waters down a fresh experience? Do you agree with me, or say, Josh, that's bullshit, it changes nothing?
Yeah, I was hoping you would ask me that, because I can't disagree more, because what is it going to water down? Instead of doing 30 SM runs, I'm now doing 15. I'm still doing all the quests for the entire zone that I want to do. I'm just going to skip the 10 quests that make me collect the same 10 items 10 times. There's no zone that I now feel that I'm wasting my time if I go back to. I'll get to experience everything and I even get to choose in maybe TBC zones. I can just stick to one zone. I don't have to go do the zones I've done 10 times in a row. So for me, there's I don't see what you could water down that you're not just going to want to do.
And that's a fair point. That's a totally fair point. Like I say, I'm someone who has sung the song of I've leveled a zillion characters. I am getting very weary of the leveling experience. I've absolutely on board with that. I guess it's more I'm trying to think of it from the new player angle, which is very hard for me to do. But then I guess you could also ask the question, why is it a situation for me to try and change someone else's experience? If, what am I going to do? Say to the new player, hey, I went through the fucking long haul, so you've got to do it. Like, obviously that's not necessarily how things should go, but, yeah, I'd be interested to see how this one plays out in the long run. Guys, we'll move on from the experience buff, but before we do, does anyone have any final thoughts on everything we've said about this experience buff?
I have a thought or two, and actually I've written it down because you forced me in the cage for so long. So it'll be concise, I promise. But I think it's really worth examining, right? Like, obviously it's not a change by itself, right? Like, it's not a, hey, this is now going to make it so it will. This is not just going to make it so that, Bobby Joe has to now not do as many quests, although it will do that. He won't have to do the same thing, but why is that a bad thing at all? Why is the choice for that a bad thing at all? People can still, try and do their quests for Lore Master in preparation for the new expansion, right? Like, for the achievements. People have a little more choice here. Generally speaking, I like the template. I like the leveling experience. I like the leveling journey, but we have to ask ourselves, right? Like, because it's not in a vacuum. Is it better to have everyone forced to do the old environment and do the old, do every single dungeon to try and level up efficiently? Or is it better to have a lively environment to encourage popular servers? Is it better to have more people doing it? Is it better to feel more alive? Because the thing that we haven't really considered is that the ecosystem that allowed Wrath to be as popular as it was, a lot of people were lower level when the expansion was released. So these older parts of Azeroth, even Outland, were a lot more vibrant, replayers than we're going to experience without this kind of buff, without this kind of incentive. So it needs real incentives for these new players, because otherwise they're just going to get the boost. And so to try and preserve that old experience of, hey, these older parts of Wrath were really alive, prior to the launch of it. And that really is the experience of a lot of players. If you ask them, yeah, sure, it might mean that you're going to skip some dungeons, but it's going to try and recreate a vibrancy that we haven't seen and really encourage people to try and be part of something. I think we see that in the design post as well. And I think that this XP bonus is not ignoring that. They don't mention it, as explicitly, but it does feel like something that they're very precisely trying to engineer. It doesn't feel random to me. It doesn't feel like the kitchen sink. It feels very precise.
I do gotta jump in there, unfortunately. Jesus Christ, I just wanted to jump in and now my fucking brain just melted. What the fuck just happened to me? I apologize.
The proximity to North effect.
Yeah, for real. I was just reciting what you said in my head and it just blew me apart.
Alright, so one little thing I was gonna maybe add on, and you might go on to this in a minute, is I think it's a very good marketing time for the 50 experience boost when we're going to reduce the boosting experience. Because those two hand in hand makes you talk about the good thing and not the reduction XP from boosting.
What I was gonna say was, Jesus Christ, that what is happening? I gotta go. I'm having a fucking stroke. Jesus Christ. Somebody else take over.
All right. Well, you
have
a thing
something about the incentives to bring players back in, something about the trying to make a more fluid experience for the world and try and, maybe, yes, they choose less, they have less content.
So I hate being evil about it, but I care more about the community than the individual player, which I get a lot of criticism about. And for me, when it comes to the community, like I said earlier, I don't want the community to evolve as fast as it will with the boost. And I worry about bots. And we all have the bot conversation left and right. We don't want to give them any more power than they already have. Thankfully, the boost is a one-time only, I think. If I recall correctly. Anyone can shout me out if I'm wrong. New players, yeah, they're gonna love the XP boost. Everyone's gonna love it. But when it comes to fresh, it's gonna be popular either way. I feel like everyone and their mother is gonna jump to fresh. Which I don't really feel there's a necessity to put it on fresh servers when it's already gonna be a popular hit.
Okay, Gigantor, that's great that you love and that you want to preserve the fresh experience. but there's going to be less people going on to Fresh without this 50%. Okay, let's look all the YouTubers, all their surveys in the last few days before the Fresh 50% announcement has all been swaying the opposite direction. There's only 20% that want to play, and now there's 80% that won't want to play, especially when they put the 90-day thing out at the start. So I think this actually, if you care about the Fresh community, I think this ensures that those Fresh servers will last at least 3 months.
Yeah, and
I think framing it, I do think framing it is important as well, though.
Hang on, let Arcos jump in. Go for it, Arcos.
Sorry. How many of the original people, I say original, quote unquote original people, how many of the people that wanted to play on Fresh servers yesterday do you think want to play on them now after this announcement? Like the private server players, they, as you say, they really like XP boosts, but take them aside for a second and think about the people who wanted a fresh beginning because they don't have 50,000 gold from GTKPs, they don't have ranked titles or whatever, they don't have anything that they're giving up. They're coming back to the game and they wanted to start on a level playing field with people, but they wanted the original experience. How many of those people are going now, I don't really know if I want this altered experience. I'm not sure how many they are, of course.
Such a negligible amount.
I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, no, because people don't realistically, we can parse this through in our heads very easily. The people coming back for this, the people who weren't doing it in the first place, why were they deterred by it? Okay, yeah, maybe it's that they don't like TBC, this, that, and the other. Part of that is how long those experiences are, how dragged out they are. Maybe it's just that they really, really enjoy the Wrath content and that they only want to experience the Wrath content. If that's what they're there for, having a fast track to that content via Fresh is definitely going to be what they need, right? Like it doesn't actually hurt anyone. It's like, oh, they want to be in the same level playing field. They still are.
Ryan, were you going to say something?
They want to go fast. They still are. You have to come in, and Ryan made a very, very good point. If you have to care about it, but I think the framing, and this was what I was trying to say earlier, the framing is really important. It's not whether or not it'll be popular without this. It's that this will make it more popular. It's just a question of extent, and we don't know how popular it's going to be, so making it more is better.
That's a fair point. Ryan, were you going to say something before? Sorry, 1 second, Arcos.
Yeah, they originally said that the Fresh servers are coming in the pre-patch. And they said that the pre-patch was previously 4 weeks. Now they've recanted and gone, okay, it might be 6 to 8 weeks. There was a lot of pressure.
Well, so sorry,
that's not
pre-patch. That 6 to 8 week reference, that's not necessarily the length of pre-patch. That's the length of this.
The XP. Yeah, correct. So even if the pre-patch is 4 weeks, like they originally planned, that puts a lot of pressure on people. If they're working full time and they can't quite make it on there, this alleviates a little bit more, at least gives more incentive, potentially gets more people on the server. There's no losing here.
Yeah, fair
if you
enough.
want that,
literally no downside. There's none. It damages nothing. It helps everyone.
Arcos, go for it. You're going to say something.
No, I was just going to keep going about there's different people going to be on the Fresh servers and they're going for different things.
Right.
I'm not sure what works for everyone, but like you guys say, there's definitely more people who will benefit from this than not. I'm just,
and that's what we can go off of.
Putting it out there
you can't help everyone.
Yeah, but we can also not gauge what will happen in the future or how large this population sizes of people that want different things are. I'm just saying that if you had data about people going committed to going Fresh, let's say 2 or 3 days ago, and you had one for today, what would be the difference? Like you say, probably it's negligible. I still think it's something we might, there's probably some people.
Ryan and North, you raise really good points. And to be fair, like I said, even though I felt a bit funny about the linking of the experience buff and the Fresh server, you do sell a really good argument in terms of, and I'd forgotten that interest in this Fresh server is not exactly massive. It is, a niche ask of the community in a weird way. Mm-hmm. And so, in order to sell this and make sure that these servers aren't dead, you've got to incentivize it, and this is how they've done that. So, look, guys, I'm not a bullish person. I'm would like to think that this is a debate and you can win me over to your argument. So, whilst I still believe that Blizzard's understanding of fresh is a little bit wonky at times. You've swayed me over to that side of the argument that you've got to do what you can to sell these fresh servers. So I get you. I've dipped a toe in your waters, if you will. So well done to you guys. Guys, let's move on. And by the way, guys, as you all know, feel free to shout over North. It's totally fine. He likes it. It's all good.
I do like it. It's a kink of mine. So
if only it wasn't right all the time. It'd be a lot easier.
Don't say it. No. Oh God.
Well, Ryan is now a member of the Cult of North. I am now a member of the Cult of Ryan. We are now inextricably linked. When I am benched, he is my voice. This is all I have to say.
Very good. Well, look, guys, let's move on to the second of the 3 pieces of information. And this one is very significant. This is, as I termed it on Twitter, the kicking to the curb of dungeon boosting in Classic. I'm happy to play devil's advocate in a little way on this one. I think it's good news. Don't get me wrong. And again, the whole Blizzard can't win argument. Here's Josh invoking that very theory. My chief complaint, yeah, I know, North, I'm a fucking piece of shit. My chief complaint about this one, which you'll have to agree with, North, and we're not going to start with you, but I'll just mention you, is that it's the motto of the Classic franchise to this point has been better late than never. And this is, I hate using that phrase because it's still like, it implies a sense of positivity. Better late than never. Thanks, Blizzard. This should have been done a ridiculously fucking long amount of time ago. And it was obviously implemented in SOM, 7-8 months ago. I scratch my head and go, so you've realized it was bad for the game, but you waited almost 3 years to implement it. Fucking golf clap. Excellent. But then we do the whole, and I've said this, if you can't praise them for when they deserve it, what's the point of being a commentator? So well done, Blizzard. Thank you for finally acting on this. Just wish you'd done it a long fucking time ago. But anyway, I've said my piece. Guys, I'll throw it open to the floor. This is huge. They're thinking of bringing the SOM-like changes into the servers, being snaring and routing changes and effects will come into, the endlessly kiting of enemies. We all know the mage boosting in slave pens, the mage boosting in Moradon, all that fucking shit. That is going to go the way of the dodo. And additionally, there will be a huge reduction to the group experience earned when there is a big disparity in player levels in the same group. So obviously that means when you tag along with a very high level or max level player, you will not be enjoying the same experience that you used to in the past. You're going to get, what I can only presume is tantamount to fuck all experience, and it won't be worth your while. So having heard all of that, I don't want to sound cynical. I just want to throw in that one little tiny cynical caveat, like I said, on the better late than never thing. Who wants to start us off? We'll finish up with North. Who wants to start us off whose name is not North on the reception to this news?
Benched again.
I can give it a go if you want to.
Go, mate.
Yeah, so the biggest thing about this news is it's hurting mages more than paladins, and it's hurting group boosts more than it is solo. Okay, so solo paladin farm, the amount of raw gold that's coming in the economy, the amount of cheap mats coming from 50 to 60 is still there. That's not going anywhere. Okay, the boosting in slave pens can still be done by a paladin, and the boosting in slabs can still be done by mages. Now you just have to add 3 mages, okay, because of the snare debuff. So what this actually hits isn't quite the people that are buying gold and running into dungeon boosts. This hits people that are doing open world farms, dungeon farms for their own gold. They're not necessarily selling it on the black market. I just think they went about this the wrong way.
I'm glad you led off with that point, mate, and I'll throw it out there to the rest of the crowd. And obviously North being a mage will get him to bring us home heavy at the end here. But, that was one of the initial reactions. Definitely. This is a kick in the dick to mages in a way. But then obviously how do you address this issue without it being a little bit of a kick in the dick to mages? Because, that is the class that is basically targeted with this kind of stuff. And you're right, Ryan. Now we're just basically buffing pallies and fucking mages at the expense of the boost meta. Something has to be done. I think that is fair to say, and I'm glad something was done. Don't get me wrong. This frees up my fucking chat channel from all the bullshit, the spam of like want to sell fucking boost, blah, 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 blah. I'm glad that's going away. But, is anyone this is so weird to say, the overall positive is so much better than the negatives, but are there any other negatives like Ryan has brought up that people are worried about?
Well, for me, it's a bit of an annoyance. I had intended to reroll a DK for Wrath. Now I'm going to have to level from 55 to 70 instead of just throwing gold at it.
So this was going to be basically just a mage boosted character for you, was it?
Yeah, for sure. Like just get it done in a day and then get into raids to grab gear for Wrath launch. I think we still don't know how long the pre-patch will be. If, like they've said, it's going to be a bit longer than TBC, but no longer than, 5 weeks or 6 weeks?
Yeah.
But if we gamble on 3 weeks, you have max 3 raid resets to get gear.
On that point, Arcos, though, please, by all means, if you think I'm being a fucking idiot, tell me. But I would push back on that point to you and say, whilst, yeah, it sucks that you might have a million characters and you don't want to level another one again. Do you think that there is an overall greater good, particularly with regards to Death Knights, that this might be the stopgap solution to every Tom, Dick, Harry and Jane having a Death Knight and the flood of Death Knights that is inevitably coming anyway, but might have been worse so with mage boosting? Do you think this might actually be a good thing?
In the grand scheme of things, this is a good thing for sure. Even if you just take Death Notes outside of the conversation, just getting rid of the XP boost, even in a little way, even though it doesn't get rid of Paladin solo boosting, just still getting rid of the mages. They should have just deleted the class 3 years ago, to be honest. But even just doing this now.
Whoa there! I'm all for the fucking, take the revolver, shoot the mages in the fucking face. I'm for it, right? Like mage ego needs to be taken down, right? And Wrath is a great opportunity for that until ICC. Anyway, this is great, but they should also shoot paladins in the face. Like, I think that's what we're gleaning from this conversation, is that it's not enough to shoot the mages in the face. Paladins get enough. Paladins are ridiculous in Wrath. Paladins are insane. Take the revolver, right? Reload the last chamber. Fucking level it out and shoot him in the face. Get rid of all the damn boosting. It would be fucking based as hell.
All right.
Yeah, but jokes aside, to answer your question regarding the...
No jokes there.
Yeah. No, but I think it will be, for sure, less DKs, at least in the first maybe week. The 50% XP bonus, of course, would counterbalance that a little bit, but for sure, there's a lot of people who either bought gold or just sitting on a lot of gold who had intended to get themselves a DK quickly. Now they probably won't. Still, if you're on a large server, if you're on the Farlina, the Benedictions, the Firemos of the world, leveling is going to be a chore, no matter if you have 50% XP boost or not. Fighting for mob drops in these zones, it's going to be a tough chore to get through, especially if you want to enter Wrath Lich King in full raid gear. You're going to have to do it really quick. That's just how it's going to have to be.
All right.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Arcos, because without sounding too snobbish, basically there was a lot of hypocrisy in that, because you were fighting for the fresh servers to not have 50% increase. And now you're saying, no, I just want to shove my DK in slave pens and just AFK Netflix.
I had noticed that. I'm glad you brought it up, Ryan.
Of course, did. But that's kind of my view on this boosting thing. It sucks for me for one purpose, but it's for the game as a whole. Of course, it should have been done 3 years ago. Whether that involved deleting the class or not, we'll leave besides the point. But yeah, this, for the health of the game, for the health of the population, the community, everything, this is a great change. Hopefully now when you get DK tanks in Wrath, the early dungeons, they'll actually know what buttons to press. They'll not have just learned all their abilities at level 70 and put them on their bars and have no idea how to play the class, for example. So yeah, the hypocrisy for sure is there, but it's just for this one tiny thing.
I'm glad Ryan brought it up, Arcos, because I was sitting here thinking, oh, it's his first time on the show. I don't want to come in swinging with the Arcos, you fucking hypocrite.
It's a fair shout for sure. But sometimes you think of just yourself, of course.
No, I appreciate
period of time.
I appreciate taking the punch. That's all good, man. Look, Cirrhosis and Gigantor, we'll finish with you guys before we get to North to bring us home. When you see something like this that we've dealt with for the past, 2 and 3/4 years, this mage boosting and just boosting in general through dungeons that became such a big part of the classic culture and will inevitably be one of the first stories raised when we start to talk about the history of classic in years to come. How do you feel about this news being delivered and being delivered now?
I'm extremely excited to see it go away the dodo. I've done both mage and pally boosting myself. I'm guilty, but I don't agree with it. I wish it didn't exist in the first place. It sucks for mages, and it's kind of silly that paladins can still solo farm. But I wish there was a way to nix the pallies as well, so it's fair, but we'll see what Blizzard does. As for now, it's pretty good.
Okay, Cirrhosis?
I think you can take a page out of
Whoa, you're coming. Settle down, big guy. Cirrhosis.
I don't quite understand the Blizzard philosophy about it, because if you want to stop boosting, why have you both added snare and reduced XP? Surely just the experience is enough to warrant anybody wanting a boost. But then you've added another complexity. Now you've broken a single player's experience of doing some grinding in dungeon, but not affected Paladin's experience. So for me, I never really liked boosting. I've never put a character into boosting, and I've only ever done it for fun, never for profit. So for me, if boosting disappeared, that's perfect. But surely just doing it by reducing the experience gain is enough. Adding this extra complexity of snaring for me is kind of ruined it a little bit.
Maybe it's just me, but I don't agree with
it's not even just snare; it slows as well.
It is eventually, they get immune to slows entirely, which doesn't stop some AoE farms, notably ZF is a good example. But, should a mage, right? Here's the question. Should a mage be able to level from 44 to 52 at less than an hour level, with no XP changes in Zul'Farrak by themselves with no penalties behind an instanced wall by abusing pathing? No. That's stupid as fuck. It's stupid as fuck, and it's bad for us to defend this shit. It's it sucks that mages lose their cool dungeon weird exploits, but that's it's done and gone. The novelty was there. It was cool when it started. It's not cool anymore. It's boring. It forces people into these dungeons. It forces them to play a really shitty way where they don't interact with other people, and they actually just abuse the economy by funneling greens into it. So it ruins if you want to go do a dungeon with your pals, great, but the mage is fucking farming an entire instance worth of mobs by himself constantly. So your ability to go and sell that green and be wow, that's great, I can make some money, it's hamstrung by the fact that people are abusing the economy. Also, paladins do this, and it's bad, and so they should again, the gun should be leveled at them, and they should be looked at next. But that's the step that they're taking, right? They are on to that path. And so I think that it's as Josh said, right? You really gotta say good job when it comes, because there's no downside to this. There is no downside to this. Again, it is very clear. The amount that there is a small downside, but the amount of people that you lose, the amount of, fidelity that you lose from people sequestering themselves in Maraudon and AoE farming, it's nil. Fuck them, right? They don't get it anyway. Fuck them. Right? Preserve the world, preserve the things that you can do in the world, force people into that world. And they go over this in the long design post that they made. They want the world to be the main character, and it can't be when you have everyone in Maraudon.
Yeah, so that's fine, North, but they could have gone down other avenues. We're both mages, so we understand this, but people used to do ZF on the floor when Classic first released, and we had all this 50 gold, raw gold just going into the economy, coming from vendoring items. Do what they did to Lasher Farm back in the day. Reduce the amount of gold, reduce the amount of XP you get from the tombs in ZF.
This is their solution.
There's plenty of ways to go about it.
But instead of going to every single mob and finding that, because it's so easy to abuse this pathing, right? Destroy the entire system, right? Don't make it so that a mage can sit in an instance by themselves. Force them to interact for their money. That is so much better. Force them to interact. Don't let them sit in an instance and farm. It's the same thing with the tribute. Yeah, there's some skill involved, and the tribute runs for Hunter. Yeah, there's some nuance. You can do it well, but it's bad. Ultimately, it's bad, and it feels bad personally.
It's because a single person experience. right?
But a single player experience that allows you to fuck up the economy for no gain for anyone outside of yourself, and it doesn't actually help you outside of a temporary boost because it's inflating everything else, right?
When you flood the market with save lots of greens that you've managed to solo, that also brings down the price of the enchanted mats for everybody. So there's not a net negative completely.
Wait, that's not good.
That's a good point, North.
That's a good thing.
North, wait, let me finish. North, wait, let me finish. Throsis.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Okay, Ryan, you were going to say something, sorry?
Yeah, a complete negative. I think there's also benefits to doing just that.
Ryan, get in there, we'll have North clap back.
Yous all hated the bots, and now they're gone on the big servers, and you're all complaining that the pots and flasks are 3 times the price. So get out there and farm yourselves. But just to get back on North's point, they can fix the pathing without hurting the farm itself. There's a lot of intricacies to those farms, and I had a Slave Pens video that went from 90,000 views to 100,000 in 2 days after this announcement. And most of the comments are people saying, I want to try and solo this. This looks fun to solo. They're not, where do the boosties stand? How many boosties do I get? How much do I charge? Most of the people trying this are solo. Yes, there are your boosters on the server that are just spamming LFG. And to get back to Josh's point, just remove them from LFG. Why does it have to be a nuke on the whole system? Why can't they just pick out the pathing, the LFG spam, and go ahead?
I think ultimately, I think it is a good point, right? But I think to the point of the, right, like to the inflation of the, right, like the reduction in price of greens, first of all, I'll respond to that. That's not a good thing. It means that people who then are doing it by other means who aren't necessarily a mage or aren't a paladin, if they don't have access to this flood of greens, they can't then by normally playing the game have access to a good that would be normally priced higher. And so it increases the amount that they have to either interact with gold sellers or interact with other things that they normally wouldn't want to, like pure farming. And so it detracts from the ecosystem that naturally occurs by deflating or inflating certain prices. To the point of yes, there are people who legitimately want to do mage solo farms and they get a lot of, they get a lot of joy out of that. When I stopped being in Grizzly, and I transferred to Grobulus, the thing that I got the most views for when I was a streamer was literally just doing Maraudon farm, right? And doing like Strat farm and doing, ZG farm. There are a lot of people who are really interested in that kind of stuff, but you have to ask why they're interested in that. Right? They want to get resources, right? Be it leveling, be it whatever. And if you give them an avenue to get those resources independently of everyone else in an MMO, you're disconnecting people, right? You're disconnecting the social experience. You're disconnecting so much of what makes World of Warcraft a world. And so yes, it does detract from a legitimate way that people enjoy the game. For sure it does. But what does it encourage? It encourages those mages to be out in the world, right? To be farming out in the world. Used to have this, this very vibrant sort of, this vibrant ecosystem of the AoE grind spots for mages being contested, and you would know like a lot of mages on the server because when you'd level, you'd actually know that, but that was completely, eradicated for several reasons, but one of them being how legitimate these solo farms are that are instanced, that are sequestered, that are, eternally imprisoning you away from the ecosystem, which is what the MMO is offering. Right? Maybe I'm just old and curmudgeon-y, right? But I really believe that people should be interdependent. People shouldn't be able to sequester themselves, and you shouldn't reward them for sequestering themselves. It should be complex group gameplay that really gets you the most out of the game. You should be solo avenues for sure, but they shouldn't be the best ones.
I agree, but North, you can bring back all these issues to the survey population issues and Blizzard's lack of enforcement early on. You can't go out and do a farm on the water ellies in Feralis. Like, you can't go and do that with layers taken down. There's 8 mages lined up, and they're all trying to ice lance the first one that spawns. It's almost impossible, and all that, you could ask all those mages, they'd much rather be in an instance. Yes, it takes away from the world, but there's a problem that is created with the server population. Just got out of control.
And there are problems. It's not a thing without problems. It's not only a positive. I think some of these changes are only positives. This has a very clear and pronounced negatives, right? Like it does level it levels the fucking chopping block at the mage head, and it says, hey, listen, this amount of gameplay that you legitimately enjoy, this is no longer on the table. Why? Because it's ultimately deleterious. Right? Like a lot of people enjoy flying, for instance. They really enjoy flying. They really enjoy the Z-axis. I still don't think that they should be given that. Like the whole fucking, team elevator shit from God knows how long ago. That was never a joke. right? Like that kind of gameplay, the fact that they are immune to other players on a mount in the sky, nothing can dismount them. All CC is basically, they're immune to it. That's bad. That's bad for the game. Even if it makes them feel safe, even if it lets them do the thing that they want to do immediately more often, right? There is a bit of, even if that's more popular, right? It's not necessarily good. It is bad.
I really enjoyed that back and forth, lads. Thank you so much for that. It was a pleasure to listen to that. For you other guys, apologies for North. It's a problem that I can only assume translates to the bedroom as well, but he has trouble with letting people finish. North, nothing? Come on.
I have not touched a woman in 5 years, so I don't know what that, I don't know. I'm so far divorced from, I am an ascetic monk of World of Warcraft and MMOs. Okay. Like the desires of flesh do not corrupt my reason and my vision. Okay. I am steadfast and righteous in every way.
Very good. All right, guys. Look, do you think we've covered it all? Do you think we're ready to move on, or does anyone have one last thing to say about the dungeon boosting point?
Not every mage can do it. It's actually a very high percentage, like a very small percentage of high-end players that can actually pull these farms off. So it doesn't reward every single mage. I
disagree with that. Like I've seen like 2 Iranian dudes with 600 damage pull off the SL farm without any fucking trouble. Sorry for the expletive there.
The Shadow Labs, I'll have to reiterate my point. Shadow Labs is completely brain dead. You press Blizzard at the cursor, done. But I'm saying things like Slave Pens, the Mara 400, these were really, really awesome challenges. And you could just look at the streamers. They had a lot of views doing this.
Skill or not, I don't think they should exist.
Yeah,
I agree. There's a lot of skill involved, especially like the big Mara runs were really cool and they were hard and they were interesting. Like you had to, like, I helped like pioneer, and I'll keep this short. I helped pioneer like a lot of the early tech in terms of like how you want to move dungeon mobs and how you want to and Maraudon's the peak of that, like how you wiggle mobs back and forth, how you make a line and then go perpendicular to it to grab them together. You do that so often and you're constantly rotating. It's such an interesting thing, and like the resists fueling your mana. It is such a cool fantasy of mage being able to do that, and yet still it is so bad for the game that it's like, even though this is a really cool unintended dope fucking thing that is really sick and like a huge skill expression outside of raids and outside of outside of PvP and like in a weird PvE thing, it's still bad. Like it's still ultimately like, hey, this is actually still awful, even if people like it, even if it's cool, even if it's a skill expression tool. It's still ultimately worse, right? Like it's a bad drug, and even if it makes you feel good, it's bad for the community. And so, you know what? Send in the fucking FBI, right? Like I don't, that's.
Would you still say that if there was no boosting for experience on top of that, if it was just for fun?
It would be less important, right? But like, if it were just for fun, who cares? But like, the drops as well. The drops do affect the economy. Maybe not in Wrath. I'm so curmudgeon about it. I'm like, fuck it. Like, everything's so damaged anyway. But like, it's an extent question, right? Like, making it less damaged is better, right? Making less access to all of these greens is better. Also, right? Like, making it so that, it's just less access to things that are then hurting the economy. And we talked about that earlier in the Fresh thing, right? Like, we want less of this impacting it, and you do that by getting rid of mage boosting, and do that by getting rid of any things like tribute runs. You do it by getting rid of paladin boosting, so you force people to actually group together to get access, generally speaking, to some of these better farms. And then I think it ends up being more interesting, and it makes then solo grinding more relevant out in the world, and it encourages people to go out there, which again revitalizes the world in such a crucial way that otherwise you wouldn't have as much of it. It's not going to do a whole lot for that, but a little bit, and it's a little bit at a time that I think is going to make the difference for Blizzard trying to reenact an old feeling, because Wrath does rely on the world a lot more even than TBC, I think.
Arcos, you're going to say something? Oh, sorry, Arcos and Ryan, and then we'll wind up on this point, guys.
Just quickly, with just while it's fresh in Norths, we take out the rogues too. They're pickpocketing right now. We take them out with the shotgun, like we take out the pally at the same time.
No, facts, actually, yes.
Good.
Like, if it's not out in the world, don't let them do it. Don't let people sequester themselves. Do not let people sequester themselves and ruin the economy in a way that the players don't have any agency at all. You should have some agency to prevent these things from happening, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we could just kill all of the, like if it were bound server theoretically, if we could just kill all of the rogues pickpocketing in whatever area out in the world, we at least would have some agency. I think removing all of the agency and making it this impossible problem where we just give up hope, I think that's bad.
Direct all listener mail to North, guys. Just remember, direct all listener mail to North. Arcos, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think there are very many good points. It's just like this should have been implemented like in phase 1, phase 2 of Classic. Like something should have been done. Like you said originally, it's a nice change now, but I feel like the damage has been done everywhere already. Like the only places where the like after effects of boosting, whether it be for just pure gold gain from drops or from level boosting, the fresh servers for Wrath are the only ones that won't have this like insane economy that we have on every other server.
That's correct. So let's give those people on the fresh the best experience and the quickest experience to catch up as possible with the 50% increase.
All right. Like I say, I mean, you sold me, Ryan. You sold me. I was leaning against you when we started. Now I'm leaning towards you. It's just, let's just go back to back, mate, and lean against each other. I'm with you. So let's move on, guys, and let's talk about the third of the three things I wanted to discuss. And
Josh, there's a point on Tyrannosaur, though, that I thought we were going to touch on.
Yeah, which one?
He actually plays SOM, believe it or not, and he loves it. So I would love to know his thoughts on they've implemented this change in SOM.
That is true.
So how has it affected his experience?
Sorry, I meant to mention earlier, but I wasn't sure. He might be mowing the lawn or something. Durana's been lurking in the chat the whole time with his mic muted, and I think he's either being polite or just listening along. He's unmuted now and he's going to drop a bomb on us. Durana, how are you?
Hi, Josh. How are you?
I'm great, mate. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so it's interesting that they brought up this whole like dungeon boost thing when they announced it, and I read through it all. I was like, this is exactly what they did with Season of Mastery, and dungeon boosting does not exist in Season of Mastery. It has not at all. And a big part of that is that the vast majority, I think, of dungeon boosting that was done in Classic and Vanilla is done with a mage. So it gets, I think, a lot more difficult to do any sort of like boosting of low level characters, or even like close to level characters if you try to do it with a paladin in Vanilla WoW. But the fact that you can't really go into any dungeons with people that are significantly higher level than you and get any experience, that's, I think, the big thing here. And I know like in TBC right now, there's still, obviously, you guys have brought up, going to be the issues of like paladins that are not that much higher level boosting characters through slave pins and stuff. And maybe Shattered Halls. But I don't know. I think it's going to definitely change the way that people level, at least if they're not buying boosts. If they're trying to use like in-game gold to get boosts done on low-level characters to get them to high-level characters, it'll completely remove that. That will not be a thing anymore. And so, at least for that piece of it, it did really well in Season of Mastery.
Very good, mate. If I had to bet, I'll bet you've been sitting here this whole time just being polite, going, I'll just keep myself muted. I was in the last episode. I don't want to, flood this countdown show with my takes. Would that be about right?
I mean, I don't need to be on every single one. I don't know.
You can be on every episode if you want. It's all good.
I feel like I haven't, nothing that I've really had outside of maybe my experience in SOM. None of my opinions have fallen by the wayside. I think you got an incredible crew here today, and I think that every time something has come up in my mind, someone here has mentioned it. So
very good. Well, mate, look, it's not like your opinion doesn't count, because we're going to weave you in on this next point, because this is the big one, guys. This huge thesis-like document of, North, what was the word you used to describe it? I'm blanking earlier.
It's a mission statement.
A mission statement. That's the one. It's their Jerry Maguire moment. What is it? Fewer clients, something or other. I'm a big Jerry Maguire fan. Look, whether or not someone was up until the wee hours of the morning sweating and writing this one out and doing handstands, that will go unknown. But we've gotten a pretty lengthy document here about the path forward for the Classic team and the tenets or the pillars on which Wrath Classic will be built. So, you know, there's some very inspiring...
Before you throw it to anyone,
yeah.
Can I ask you a question on this?
Sure.
Do you remember when we had that call? It must have been 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember. It was a long time ago. Right before Classic launch, I was on, OG was on, and I was lamenting the batching. Because we hadn't seen how it had been implemented, like it was implemented and it looked really slow. And he was like, no, they're going to fix it. They're going to fix it. And I was just like, no changes is not the way.
Shot
it's gotta be hashtag some changes, right? Like, that became a staple in my stream, this phrase. And so I cannot tell you what it means to when I opened this document, I saw SFan link it. In that Discord. The first line you see, other than, you know, the little preface in the title, is hashtag some changes. And that made me so happy.
Are you claiming to be the grandfather of hashtag some changes, that moniker?
I think that a lot of people came to the phrase at a very similar time. I'm not going to say that I was the one who came up with it, but I was using it a lot and I independently, you know, came up with it. A lot of people were like, hey, you know, if not no changes, then what? Right? Is it all the changes or is it some changes? Right? There were three, realistically, there are only three camps to be. Either you have none, you have all, or you have some. Right. And the only logical way ever that made sense to me was some. And so I've always been in the some camp. I was an early some changes adopter. You know, maybe not the progenitor of it, but,
this is going to be like
it feels good to have your team represented, you know?
It's going to be like the battle for Facebook and you claiming this one. I came up with
my head on them and my name on them.
Are you Zuckerberg or are you the Winklevoss twins? I'm not sure. But
no. I'm
you're Andrew Garfield.
Whoever Andrew Garfield plays, yeah, because Andrew Garfield's dope.
Very good. All right, look, guys, let's get into it. North, I'll get you to kick us off on this one. Let me just say my piece. Look, like I said, it is a lengthy document. It goes through, about 4 or 5 pillars, like we say. And within these descriptions of, you know, there is a little bit of fluff and nice words about, you know, all the positive things and, you know, the experience that they want to build for us in Wrath Classic. But there are some very specific details and examples mentioned within these pillars. And they're going to, you know, create a lot of a discussion for us to talk about, quite frankly. But, North, I'll just start with you. Like you said, it was very, cathartic in a way for you to see this document on the whole. I read it when I first woke up. I've passed through it very quickly. You're going to know it a lot better than I will. But, before we get to the specific details, like your Naxx changes and all of that shit. So if we divide North, the fluff from the specifics, how did you feel about the fluff?
So, I think that the fluff kind of came down to, right, they presented these 3 main sort of pillars. Okay. The first is to nurture and protect social experience. The second is to be approachable and familiar. And the third is to center the world as the main character. I think the first, it speaks to social emergence that I talk to. You know, I say it a lot on this show. I think people are aware of my shtick. My shtick is fairly consistent. It's fairly, you know, ecosystem based, and social emergence, you know, involving online experiences that out in the world kind of forge these friendships, these rivalries, and the thing that they say is they call it repeat serendipitous interactions. That is so crucial to what makes an MMO, and you have them here writing it down. Approachable and familiar, I think, is something that as a pillar, I kind of hate that. But you're always going to do, you know, like that is my beef with Classic, and that, you know, that is always my issue, is that they want things to feel comfy to people. I don't value comfort. I value discomfort. I value innovation, and I like the wrench being thrown into the machine, and just seeing what sticks and what doesn't. But I get why they want this, right? They want things to feel comfy. They want things to feel cozy. They don't want to make it crazy. That's more of a SOM approach, right? Like they want things to feel as close to as they were, right? And I think that's a good thing for them, you know, to center, because it's a lot of, you know, appealing to the nostalgia crowd, appealing to the, you know, like the old player crowd. And I think that it's an effective thing to do. But the world as the main character is something that I'm surprised they would put in here, along with the social emergence. I'm surprised they would put that in there, because that's the third pillar. Having the world as the main character, right? Like giving you a reason. They said, we love your exploration, player-driven stories, want to make sure you have a reason to visit various locations in the world. This is part of why they got rid of Random Dungeon Finder, right? Because they want you to have to actually go to these places and interact with other players in this sort of vibrant social experience. They give a weird example of like you should be able to click the Lost Pages of Green Hills and Stranglethorn. That's a little weird. But, like the concept itself though, I think so strong and it really, it's nice to read the anchoring. I look forward to how they implement these things, but again, having them express the importance that the world has to them and actually taking some concrete steps, at least in the, the change of the random dungeon fighter to the retail tool, to just the group finder and not having it be as anonymous and as, sort of world endangering and trying to protect these social experiences and trying to protect the social emergence and trying to reduce the impact they have on those things. That is so important to an MMO. They have never outright stated. They've kind of just always in the past been like, we're trying to recreate experiences, but what aspects of them? And we have them here. And it's good. The fluff is fucking great. People are going to skip over it because that's what people do. The fluff is great. I really encourage everyone to go read it over again because it is actually fantastic. And I'll have more to say on that later, but I'm interested in what the other guys have to say.
I'm going to throw it to the other guys. I just want one last thing out of you, North, real quick. I'm going to put my tongue firmly in my cheek and say I read nurture and protect social experiences. And I wonder how that reads in that paragraph with the GDKP meta that's become part of Classic. Now you're going to say, well, the GDKP is a social experience, Josh. It's just a different one. But I do somewhat have a chuckle when I read that paragraph and think of what we're doing in game at the moment.
I read an interesting perspective on this actually, and that and we had obviously had a long conversation with that. I encourage people who are interested in that kind of discussion to actually to go and check out the GDKB discussion I had with Josh. But something that I read and I thought was really a succinct way of summing up what it offers. It is a real way of having a lot of care done to ensure a smooth raid that other kinds of raids don't have because you don't have these in pugs. No one's going to try and make a pug that effective, a soft res run that effective. You don't have a continual incentive throughout the raid. If the boss doesn't drop your thing, there's nothing keeping you there. There's nothing keeping your reputation out on the line because they're not interrelated in the same way. Whereas for this, it ensures the quality of the run, ensures the leaders are, very conscious about who they're taking, very aware of whether or not can be completed. So for a lot of players, the overall experience is actually better in a lot of those. Obviously, we have the issues with the bots and, how it interacts with the economy and the fact that no gold farms work. So you're like forced into the GDKP. That sucks. You shouldn't be forced into it. You really should not. But it does actually provide a little bit. And I really think it's so interesting when you read all this fluff and when you don't actually look at what individually they're talking about in terms of changes, when you look at the ideas that they're thinking about making. I think that it's so interesting, the things that they're bringing up. And again, happy to go with that later. Other people, we have such a great lineup. I want to hear what they have to say.
Absolutely. Let's go down the line, guys. I want to throw it over to you, starting from the bottom up. We'll go through Cirrhosis. I just want to ask you basically the same question. Look, mate, have you had a chance to read this post? And same question that I posed to North is putting the specifics aside, like your Naxx difficulties and blah, 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 blah. Just going through basically the concept of a post like this. Blizzard does tend to get very verbose around about beta times. Funny that. And here we are with the big spelling out of their plans for the game moving forward. How do you feel about receiving communication like this from Blizzard?
It's good. I mean, it can't be bad to understand the philosophy behind the changes. I mean, they're going to use this as ammo whenever they make a change that's probably not very well received. But the hashtag SomeChanges, I approve. When Classic first came out, I was 100% hardcore, no changes person, which lasted about 2 seconds when they told us they were going to implement batching. And then I was like, no, some changes, please. So I'm pretty happy with some changes in the philosophy they're going with. The bit that I would be a little bit wary of in general as a philosophy of this post is that they're very much basing it on that serendipitous, that luck experience like Brian was talking about when he said that during the dungeon he found a tank that wasn't great tanking, then he helped in tanking and it was like great experience for everybody. That is like not everybody's experience, and it's like maybe like 5% of your entire time would that ever happen. So basing like decisions based on that like smallest bit of the gameplay is good as a philosophy, but I wouldn't be confident they're going to make like maybe the best decision for everybody's gameplay based off it.
I hear you. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I hear you. And Ryan, I'll throw it to you. I'll just piggyback off of the back of what you've said, Cirrhosis there. Look, a lot of the comments that came following that Brian interview with myself, zeroed in on that very comment that you've just highlighted, that people sort of balked at the romanticism that Ryan threw behind his own, that Brian threw behind his own personal experiences in game that he relayed to us. And people very much so said, that is not, that is such a unicorn of an experience. That is not how the game is generally played or experienced these days. It was a bit weird in the meta player base that is the classic players to hear a story like that, and people kind of did point it out. But anyway, I'm glad you raised that. Ryan, let me throw it to you. Same question, mate. How do you feel overall about this kind of offering that Blizzard has given us communication-wise about where we're going?
Yeah, so first impressions, great. They're trying to manufacture a community that's a little bit more conducive with what they believe in their values. But also, it just seems like a little bit of a stab and a nail in the coffin to the RDF conversation with Random Dungeon Finder. So if that's how they want to preface this going forward, that's fine. But I just wanted to touch on one point, the nurture and protect social experiences. It should be written to nurture and protect our social experiment. It just doesn't feel organic. They're trying to push this on a player base. They basically said, you guys have had your reign for a couple of years. You can't pull it together. You're still toxic. You're still doing this. You're still doing that. We're going to come in and lay down the rules.
All right. Gigantor, how about you?
I'm generally ecstatic about it, particularly about the part. Well, I'm probably jumping the gun on this, Josh, but the challenges.
So sorry, mate. Can you sit a little bit closer to your mic?
The challenges for heroic dungeons. I'm jumping the gun probably on this, but that's what I'm mostly excited about. That's going to open up an entire new avenue, I'm hoping, of challenges that the hardcore community was looking forward to.
All right. Arcos, how about you, mate? What were your thoughts on this lengthy post?
Where to start? I'm not sure. I feel like there's a lot of fluff, a lot of things that aren't concrete. Like, they're not really making promises as I read it. They're just saying, I feel, how do I put this? They're sugarcoating a lot of things, and not saying what they're actually going to do. Like, they do throw out there, sure, that Naxx is going to be more difficult and that they'll add some hard modes to heroics. We can discuss that later, but the rest of the text, to me, it just feels like corporate speak, to your investors or your customers. To
play devil's advocate,
make them feel good.
To play devil's advocate, Arcos, if I can keep you going on that, if I were to suggest that vagueness or brevity is actually key in a situation like this, where they're not necessarily going to, push themselves in a corner with, very, very niche specifics at the outset, as opposed to creating, much like how terms of service work, creating this vague framework within which they have a lot of flexibility to work in the future and interpret as they see fit. And yes, interpret and, implement in a way that obviously suits them, but you have that flexibility that, players can't point to later on and said, do the whole, like, how could you do this to us? You've changed what you said months ago. Don't you feel that that's, relatively important in a drafting of something like this?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that it is vague, and it's vague for a reason. It's so that they have multiple backdoors to move and position themselves depending on changes that haven't happened yet. I think any company in the real world loves a situation where they are free to interpret things as they see fit and not as their customers see fit. But that's not what the customer wants, right? The customer, like the players, we want things to be, we want more knowledge. We want more promises of things, how they will be specifically. What are they specifically going to do to nurture and protect social experiences and make things approachable and familiar and make the world the main character? Like, what are the actual things that they're going to change and do? And they don't, we might get that post later, we might not, but to me, that's why I say, like, this is a lot of fluff. They're not really giving us concrete things. It's kind of the main point. Okay. And of course, like I said,
think they've given us what want to do that. I think they've given us what they can. in all honesty, right? Like they even despite, yes, they don't have a lot to show for it. I agree completely, right? Like they don't have a lot to show for it. But they explain the things that they've even thought through and what they're trying to do with it, right? Like they want to make, right? Like they want to make heroics an important part of the ecosystem. I've had, Josh can attest to this in the Discord, that he and I, share where people often, talk about this kind of thing. I have been a pretty vocal critic. Hey, heroics mean nothing. They mean nothing after the first, month. They do nothing. And they're trying to fix that. And they're saying like, hey, listen, like this is the steps that we're taking to. And so yes, they're vague. Yes, they haven't taken all these concrete steps. Yes, the customer wants more concrete shit. But I think we have to be forced with the reality, which is very clear, that this is beginning for them. They're finally willing to open up the gates and say, okay, you know what? Some changes. And we're going to look at that and we're going to dedicate ourselves. Here are the three main things that we want to preserve. And here are some things that we've thought through. Naxx definitely needs a nerf. Heroics definitely need to be positioned in a more interesting, where we're not sure exactly how that's going to look, because this is the beginning of their journey, of them trying to balance the servers, of them trying to introduce a compelling fresh, of them trying to reintroduce the old dynamics of the world that, that actually make this experience worthwhile and more like an MMO and less like a PvE raid simulator. And I think that they've done that, at least in terms of their posturing very effectively. And they're starting to stick their own guns. Sure, Ryan has a problem because this is their final word basically on the RDF, but that's dope, right? I'm sure Ryan would agree. People have always called a Blizzard, you don't have a consistent design philosophy. You guys don't actually have an idea of where this is going. And I've agreed with that, right? Like for a very, very long time, they didn't stick to their own guns. And this is them for the first time displaying a relatively clear vision of where they want to go and sticking to this. And they're like, no, this is actually what we want. We're going to give you good tools. It's not exactly what you wanted. It's definitely a less popular thing to go with no RDF. I don't even think that's even a question. It's less popular, but they think it's better. And that is based as all fucking hell. That they're willing to stick to their guns.
Tyrannosaur, let's get you to finish this one off. Just real quick on what everyone has said, same question. We'll get into the specifics we'll get you to lead off on the specifics as well. But just before we get there, overall, how do you feel about this nice touchy-feely document about the future of Wrath Classic?
I think it's good. I think for a lot of the reasons that other people have brought up, I think that it's great for them to actually at least internally take the time to work these things out. Like even if they hadn't shared it with us, if the fact that the team got together and took the time to think about, what is important to them, how do they want to move forward, what is their sort of framework as they continue to work on Classic, I think that's all great. I'm happy that they did that. I'm happy that they shared it with us. But I'm not gonna, start patting them on the back and popping champagne until it's clear that moving forward, they are actually adhering to these things, that they are, when they make decisions, they are, either referencing these pillars, or it's just clear based on the decisions that they're making them with the pillars in mind, with these things in mind. So all in all, yes, I think it's good, but you gotta walk the walk after you talk the talk.
Okay. Guys, let's get into the specifics now and just I'll just have my 2 cents. And I hate to sound, a little bit curmudgeon-y, but I do at times. Like, I agree. I'm with you guys. I think it's a positive that it's really nice to see a well-worded document about the design philosophy and to have that sort of shared out in the open with us. That's wonderful. If I can sort of split though, where I go, there's a difference between philosophy and communication. And like Tyrannosaur said, I sort of, ask everyone to hold the champagne for sure. When we start slapping Blizzard on the back for sharing this philosophy, absolutely do that. That's wonderful. High five to Blizzard. It's great to have that kind of communication. But when we also talk about high-fiving them for communication, that's where I sort of pull back the hand and they get the air swing, where I'm like, I mentioned it very, very earlier and, I alluded to this earlier and they tend to get very, very verbose, Blizzard, around about beta time. This happened with TBC beta. It's happening now with Wrath beta. The water starts to bubble. They get more communicative. Everyone starts saying they're talking to us. This is wonderful. But then they go for cigarettes once the game is out. Now, don't get me wrong. Through the lifespan of TBC, Blizzard's communication generally improved because they said fucking nothing to us through Classic. I was very critical of their CMs and everything through the 2 years of Classic. It has improved through TBC. I would hope it improves again through Wrath, but very much so, Blizzard does a good job of appearing very much for the people, and we're having fun with you over this next 6 to 8 weeks of beta. And let's just see if it continues that way, you know, halfway through phase 2 of Wrath. We shall see. Now, not to be too much of a Debbie Downer, but let's now talk about the specifics, which will lift us up a little bit. North, let me throw it to you. Look, mate, we might as well talk about the heaviest one really to lead off with. Naxx changes. This is something that a lot of people were asking for. We've talked about this on the show. I've been of the belief personally, but nobody should listen to me because what the fuck do I know? I've been of the belief that Classic should have easy content. Like I said to you and Ryan earlier, you guys swayed me to your argument about Fresh during this podcast. I am flexible. I am, capable of critical thinking. I am not so curmudgeon-y that you cannot sway me with how you argue something. In saying that, my previous position on content in the game used to be buff everything, make this game harder. I'm sick of people face rolling everything. I was actually swayed from this point by Def Camp and Melderon some time ago on the show when they were talking about Karazhan and said, Josh, it is a good thing for an MMO to have some, not all, some chill content, like that easy par 3 on a golf course where you can fucking sip your beer and just, have a bit of fun. Sometimes it's good to have the dungeon or the raid that you can, have a beer, have a smoke with, muck around with people and everything's not balls to the wall and you have to be paying attention all the time. They swayed me to that argument as that podcast went on. And by the end of it, I was like, fuck. I think they're onto something here. Maybe universally buffing content is a bad thing. Now, I'll just say this in regards to Naxx. I don't remember anything about old Naxx. Everyone says it is the easiest walk in the park and a fucking joke and it absolutely had to be changed. And that might well be the case. But I still somewhat believe in that philosophy that was passed on to me, that not everything in Wrath Classic should be universally buffed, potentially weeding out some shittier players like me. I don't know. North, I've been going on too long. How do you feel about everything I've just said?
So I've had my mind changed about this too. And I think we've been in some of the same environments when this has happened. I used to be more for the harder, like universally harder PvE. But I don't think that is really what the game needs. If you want a holistic, experience to actually thrive. So like what I would say the vanilla experience is of the world being important. Like I don't think that raids need to be the end all be all. And so I think that trying to up the difficulty is sort of committing to this emphasis of, yes, the raids are the end all be all. I think that is a very complex ecosystem that you actually have to work in though, is my only problem. It's like, okay, well, you can make, yes, I actually do want MC to be a little less boring, for instance, in vanilla, maybe PWL as well, AQ as well, but Naxx I think is actually tuned pretty well. I think that adjusting some aspects to make it a little less brain dead and a little more interactive, but not longer. I think increasing health values and making things a proper slog is actually not that fun. They kind of saw that in Som. I don't know how they enacted it because I didn't keep playing Som, but like just having really long boss fights isn't to me necessarily interesting, especially when that content doesn't need to be end all be all, right? Like it doesn't need to, you doing MC should not be the most interesting thing that you do in my mind in vanilla World of Warcraft, because again, it's just instance content. And it's a part of the game, but it shouldn't be all of it. And so that is to say, this is, very long-winded. The reason why I think they're doing this with Naxx and the way that they're doing it with Naxx, and the reason why they haven't committed to say, oh, let's increase the difficulty of Ulduar, let's increase the difficulty of TGC. I think they recognize the thing that that you're speaking to. I think they want to make it kind of approachable and kind of easy. Right? Like it shouldn't be impossible. And so, and Wrath does have this approach as well, where you have these heroics, you have more optional modes where you can choose to challenge yourself, which is really good. You don't have that early on with Naxx. And Naxx is, A little too, if we're going to go to the second design philosophy, a little too approachable. You don't remember it, even back in the day when, remember how fucking awful we were at the game back in the day. People started getting okay at the game in Wrath, in my experience.
Yeah, were.
But that's just because I started getting okay at the game in Wrath, right? And then I was actually good in Kata. But in Wrath, it was such a fucking pushover. It was so fucking easy. Even in Wrath, we are light years better than we were before. It's not that it's going to be a pushover, Josh. It's not that these buffs are going to make it, I'm kind of against the whole like, ooh, yeah, the damage and the health, is that really going to, yeah, it will help because it won't make it hard. It's going to make it less than 10, it's going to make it longer than 10-second boss fights.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're going to
if that's the case,
it's going to be 10-second boss fights if they don't touch it.
If that's the case, I'm on board.
Legitimately bad.
If it is that much of a joke, North, I'm on board. If it was like we're talking 1 out of 10, no hyperbole difficulty even to the average player.
Legitimate.
Then and like I said, this is where I have to step back a little bit for the conversation because I do not remember. But I'll take, I trust you. I'll take your feedback on board. If that is the case, then I am for this buff. But if this was sweaty players doing the move where they go, oh my God, it was so fucking easy when it kind of wasn't, which I don't believe is the case here, then I would be more cautious, if you know what I mean.
And I agree with you. I'm right on board with this, but I think that when we read this document, right, when we read this document and we really go into the nitty gritty of this, this is the English double major in me. Okay. Right. Like they, in the paragraph after, the itemization changes, there are the bullet points and it says their first goal is nurturing our communities, blah, 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 blah. We want to make sure it continues. To further this, we've been exploring a few options. They go over some of the things that they wanted to do and really couldn't do. They wanted to make the 10 and 25 players drop the same items. You can't really do that because there are certain items in the 10 man that are specific and you have to like completely fuck the loot tables. But basically, they said we were thinking and we did not decide to implement increasing the starting difficulty for heroic dungeons. I think one of the strengths, I still do think that they're too easy, the heroic dungeons, but they decided not to at this time to increase the starting difficulty for heroic dungeons. Instead, what they want to do, in the next paragraph, they outline this. We want to make heroic dungeons stay attractive. They want to keep them in the ecosystem, but we are exploring plans to add challenges to heroic dungeons as the expansion proceeds, which would provide more valuable rewards. And that's something to me really evokes the same kind of framework of the challenge modes in MOP and in WOD, which were actually very effective, very cool, big skill expression in 5-mans. And it was it was just for cosmetics. And so, it was like ooh, can I do this thing well? Let me ratchet up the challenge. I do want a challenge for this. So yes, you still have the content being approachable and familiar, but you have this extra thing for players who really do want to be up. So you do cater to both groups simultaneously. You let the people have the Moon Song Glaive or whatever that was like the really, really cool pole arm from WOD. You let people show off, hey, I can kick ass in these dungeons, but you're not restricting that content from the casuals at large. You're keeping most of it approachable and familiar. And I think that is what they're going to hone in on. And that's why they've expressed what they've expressed thus far.
Very well said, mate. Look, take a drink break. I'm going to throw it open to the floor. Everyone who's not named North, I want to hear from you guys on this Naxx buffing. Good, bad, why? Go nuts, guys.
Just jumping quickly in because I need to head off after this.
Yeah, sure, mate.
I agree that there should be a buff to Naxx, but not the normal version. I think they should just flat out give a Naxx a heroic version, because sometimes you just want to chill, like you've already mentioned, and Naxx normal is perfect. It's the first raid, everybody's leveling out, so it doesn't need to be difficult. But they made heroic and hard modes features of the related raids, and it works, right? It's in every ever expansion. Just give Naxx a hard mode, heroic mode, and then that would, for me, solve pretty much everything they were trying to address here.
Okay, fair enough, mate. So, Cirrhosis, you're saying, it's sort of defined easy though for you? Are you saying you do want a bit of a snooze fest, or just easy or moderate, or what are you talking about?
As an entry raid, I want the snooze fest. I want a bit on a Friday night, beers with your friends, let's jump out on Naxx like you do with Karazhan. But I want the option on a raid night to do a heroic version. I want that ability to choose. And then, because sometimes, even if I want the heroic version, if my guild isn't a heroic raiding guild, I can't achieve it. So having the option of both is what that heroic mode for me achieves.
Very good. Cirrhosis, mate, you got to head off. Do you want to take this opportunity to say goodbye now, or are you sticking around a little bit longer?
Yeah, it's going to be late in the UK for me.
No, that's okay, mate. Look, let me just say thank you so much for joining today. It's listeners like you that are the salt of the earth of this show. This show wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for people like you putting their hands up and jumping in calls like this. Mate, please shout out whoever you want to shout out, say whatever you want to say. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thanks very much. No, just enjoy your podcast and I'll catch up the rest of this one tomorrow.
Too easy. Thanks, mate. All right. All you other guys, please, first in, best dressed. Who wants to carry on the Naxx conversation? Good, bad, why?
Good. They need to make sure the throughput isn't too easy. Like North said, you cannot go in there with 25 people all prepped, flasks, ready to go, done my pre-bis, and then the boss dies in 15 seconds. It's just going to feel like shit. I don't care if you want to loot pinata. After a while, it's going to feel pointless. It's going to feel like you're playing retail in a 5-man dungeon with 25 people. I think the throughput is very important that they get that right, and they can go back and look at SSC. They can look at Muru now, where there's that big hurdle of mid-tier guilds that are struggling there, and they can check the throughput and see, okay, these are the people that are missing certain abilities in their rotation, downtime, things like this. We need to tune it around so at least, not majority, but at least 3/4 of people that are logging have a chance to have some type of challenge, or at least have, at least they have a chance to go for certain healers and things like that. One of the options is if you put in hard mode difficulties on some of the bosses towards the end, you can give them an extra piece of loot that's on that current loot table as a reward. Potentially.
Very good. Let me just say, by the way, Ryan, mate, all of you callers have been absolutely fantastic, but Ryan, you are fucking knocking it out of the park, mate. I want to say you're channeling your inner North. You're like an Australian version of North. I should call you South.
I hope so. I've been watching him since 2019.
Oh, North. Does that tickle your pickle?
A disciple. Welcome.
Very good.
Welcome to the cult of never being wrong. It is an arduous road. It is a burden that we bear with resilience, with pride, with humility.
You fucking loser.
Carry on.
Gigantor, Girana, Arcos, guys, jump in. Good, bad, why? Naxx Buffs.
I'd have to agree with points from both Cirrhosis and Nogs there, Ryan, because Naxx, well, it's not supposed to be hard, but at the same time, I wish there was a heroic mode for it, because it is the only raid in ICC content that doesn't either have a hard mode modifier or a heroic mode. It's either just 10 or 25, and 25 is considered the harder mode, which is kind of a little silly. And it would be strange for them to buff it now, because if they buff Naxx now and make it slightly harder, that may potentially make it harder than regular 10-man Oldlar, or even 10-man, TOTC.
No, not even remote. Like the thing that cannot be understated, and I'm sorry that I'm jumping off the bench. It is so fucking easy. Like it is insanely fucking easy. Like it is right. Like you would have to buff it like 5x, which they're never going to do, because they're never going to do over 100%. And they're never going to do that. And even 2xing it, like they will never actually, make it harder than any other rate. It's legitimately. I see you right clicking on my name trying to mute me. John.
No. I'm turning Gigantor down because he changed to his mobile and he was a bit loud.
I see through the lies of the Jedi.
Please.
But realistically, like it is just so hard to make. Like I agree that would be a problem if they did that. If it didn't feel harder, if it felt like weirdly out of place, if they like 7x to Naxx and then Ulduar were easier, that'd be really lame. But it's just, it is really, really hard to and I actually like that solution of, I agree with Josh. Ryan's on fire. I hadn't even thought of that. That's brilliant. Let there be some hard modes in Naxx, right? Like just whips them up. Give them an extra piece of loot. That's sick, right? Like it's not, it's not necessary. You're going to have a lot of time farming Naxx. The gear is not that essential.
I've been a huge proponent of adding one item to the loot table if something is done right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's super interesting that got brought up as an idea, because in Season of Mastery right now, the most recent raid that was released was AQ40, and they introduced hard modes of AQ40. And you can activate these modes, and they add extra mechanics. They make the fights harder, and for doing that, you get an extra piece of loot off of the bosses.
Oh, did they really? I was screaming for that when we were doing our Season of Mastery podcast.
Yeah, for AQ.
Yes.
For AQ40, they had the different modes. You have to have a certain rep to do it.
I'm claiming that one. Fuck you all. I'm claiming that.
When I read these changes for Naxx, it came because Naxx PTR for Season Mastery is coming out tomorrow, and when the Naxx PTR for Season Mastery came out, my first thought actually was, oh man, I wonder if they're actually going to take this opportunity to maybe mess with some things and then take whatever information they get from this and from Season Mastery and maybe look at implementing some of those things in Wrath of the Lich King next. And so all of these ideas about, okay, yes, they do want to buff it. They haven't said what they're going to do yet, but us just talking about it here and throwing around these ideas of, well, they could, give us maybe some hard modes and give us extra loot. Like all of this is very much in line with the way that Season Mastery has kind of been going, which I don't know. It might just be a coincidence, but I think that there's an opportunity here for Blizzard to continue to use SOM as the beta test that it feels like it is, and maybe actually utilize it for Wrath of the Lich King.
I agree. Quick insertion though. They did actually say specifically, and this is actually something I think we should talk about. I think we were remiss not to talk about it because I think this is potentially, a lot of people have a problem with this, in part because I think they don't realize how easy Naxx is and that it just needs a bit of a kick, in addition to just bring it in line with not completely, like post nerf Grohl levels of pushover. Is that one, so they do say, the one change that we've decided to make is to increase the health and the damage of monsters in Naxx Ramus. They were specific about it. They did not say that they were introducing mechanics. They did not say they were doing cool SOM shit. I don't think that's thrown it out of the, completely out of the window, completely off the table. But they have been specific about that. And I think that is, I'm not really sure where I stand on this. I'm curious what you guys think, because on the one hand, I think that it just needs to be brought in line. I don't think they need to make it more complicated and crazy. I think that they do, on some level, want to keep it approachable and familiar, right? They want it to be easy. Intro raid, farm your stuff, get your beers, and it doesn't have a heroic mode, and you can't really, right, like other than like trying to introduce individual hard modes like Ulduar, which would take some work. That's the only really thing on the table, because you can't make it heroic because the loot can't be separated in that way. It's just not. That wasn't how the loot was designed, because it wasn't designed like later raids. It wasn't designed like Star 3 Drakes.
The only way they can do it is to make like loot that's not as good. Like the current version would have to become the heroic version, and they'd have to create a lesser version.
Yeah, which I think people would feel bad, right? Because that just, it feels like you're taking stuff away then. So it's like, I think that's like an impossibility for them. So it's like, on the one hand, right, you can't really create a heroic mode for Naxx. And then if you bring the one up, you're bringing it up by health and damage. If you want to make it more complicated, I think that's more comprehensive and actually is more interesting. But to Josh's point earlier, there needs to be easy content. Easy content is important. And I think that begins to begin to endanger. I'm curious what you guys think, because I'm not sure where I lean on that. I lean that the health and damage is probably fine because they want to just bring it up. I wish they would do more comprehensive changes. I get why they don't, from both a work and, ease and familiarity and approachability aspect. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys think.
North, I gotta ask. Sorry. No, you're okay. But North, where would you want Naxx's difficulty to stand in comparison to TBC's difficulty? Say, like, we have Karazhan compared to Black Temple. Where would you want Naxx to sit?
At least at Kara, right? Like post-nerf Kara, right? Like post-nerf Kara.
That's the way it is now.
Yeah. So like not, like at a breeze, but not, what's a good, not.
Like, would you say Naxx, the way it is on Wrath release, is easy as Kara is now? Or do you want it to be harder?
I think it's easier than Kara is now.
Okay.
That's how awful the balls. Mike was talking about this. The DPS check overall is lower in the 25-man version of Naxx than it was in the 40-man version in vanilla. Right? The DPS check is literally lower on Patchwork. That is how fucking easy this dungeon is. When you're doing like 6 times the amount of damage.
Mike just had to go change pants because he knew his name, North. Arcos.
First I know his fucking name.
That's the way. Arcos, let me inject you, mate. Sorry, someone else is going to say something before we get there. Arcos, what do you think about all this Naxx stuff?
Yeah, I wrote down 4 things, like in the good and the bad column. In the bad column, I wrote that hard modes would be a better solution than just straight buffing. But I think you still need to straight buff it. Like, I think, personally, 2x, 3x of every value and then hard modes on maybe half the bosses, that would be preferable to myself. But like North said, they'll never buff it that much. Of course, there's not going to be a heroic version. I would assume there won't be a heroic version, at least. In the good column, like, if it's not a pushover, that's good. Like, it's easier than 5-man heroics, the way it was back in the day. Like, it's just so trivial, it doesn't matter. And there's no satisfaction in beating content that's completely pushover, right? For example, if you take SSC TK pre-nerf, imagine all of the guilds that had spent weeks and weeks and like dozens and dozens of wipes trying to get pre-nerf KT or Vash or Muru now, for example, and then it gets nerfed to the ground. Like, the dissatisfaction of having content be so easy that you just, like, you blow a little bit on it and it just falls over. It's not fun to rate that content weeks on end. And as well, phase 1 in TBC, like, the player attrition in phase 1 TBC, because it was so easy and there was no content, it staggers belief how many people quit the game, I think, in phase 1 TBC. And without a buff to Naxx, I think phase 1 Wrath would just be the same. Like, you'll jump into Naxx 10, you're out in 30-40 minutes. You jump into 25-man, you're out in the same time. And like, Sarth and Malgus are pushover as well. Like, you'll be done with all your week's raid in maybe 3 hours. Like, it's just too easy. Like, there's
probably
no way
less. Yeah, bosses are only getting killed in 20 seconds. Just got one more point. So we need to keep in mind that we're all people that play this game who are willing to talk about this game on a podcast for more than 2 hours. We need to think about the whole philosophy of Wrath, and that was the barrier to entry. They're trying to push this, making sure everyone can be included, and that's the reason why I believe it was so easy back in the day. And I think that if they add mechanics to Naxx, yes, we would all love it, but I think it would actually be detrimental to a lot of the new people coming back, or to the people they expect. They expect a new wave of people to come back. And I'm not sure they would be willing to go through higher health values, higher ad values and all that, and then mechanics on top of that. While I would love it, I would love a heroic mode, or at least last few bosses, and incentivization to extra piece of loot, I don't think it's feasible. But while we go from Naxx into Ulduar, it needs to make sure that Naxx isn't such a big of a jump, or Ulduar isn't such a big of a jump. We can't have people go in, face roll Naxx, and then their guild dies the first week of Ulduar.
I'm glad
they
you
need to be very careful with that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. Sorry, one second.
Everyone needs something to do, right?
Sorry.
Everyone needs a raid.
Argos, can you hear me? I was just going to say 1 second. I'm going to throw it to you. I just want to say I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan, just because long time listener brought up in the Discord just yesterday, the fact that the podcast, absolutely does lean towards the sweatier player. And, lamenting a little bit that the casual perspective doesn't really get heard on the show. And, obviously when things like Subtle comes on the show talking about paladins and saying, he can knock off a heroic in 5 to 8 minutes by chain pulling multiple bosses and blah, 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 blah. It irks the casual player because they're like, well, that's not fucking how I play the game, and I understand that. And it's an absolutely fair call to say that whilst Classic, I've said this for, years now, obviously the bulk of the Classic player base is very much more skewed towards the hardcore player than other MMOs. I get that. It's not like the casuals don't exist. So it absolutely has to be something that's factored in. I do agree with you. Sorry, Arcos, go for it.
I think the more hardcore player is at least louder maybe than the casual one. So perhaps that's why we hear so much that kind of viewpoint. But it's absolutely true. Every player of every skill level should have content that's curated for them, or like that's perhaps not curated necessarily, but that works for them.
Something that they can have fun doing. Yeah, like it shouldn't only cater to the top end.
No, but it doesn't either need to be a complete mirror of the other content, like the other quote-unquote content that the more hardcore players are doing. Personally, I would prefer that heroic modes never existed. I would prefer that everyone goes into the same raid at the same difficulty, but every single boss has hard modes, and they may have varying levels of hard modes, like Yogg, 3 lights, 2 lights, 1 light, right? So you can pick and choose for your raid how difficult you want your experience to be, how big of a challenge you want to set yourself, and then once you get through that challenge successfully, you have the satisfaction for yourself of that challenge mode. But you're still in the same raid. Like for me, where retail went off is that everyone was in different types of raids. Like I don't know, at some point there were 4 different difficulties in the same goddamn raid. Like, I don't know, people don't want to improve if they can see the fights and then just fuck off, you know?
It's so true that like it truncates it and they feel that they've completed it. I think that the real answer is the TBC answer. Where, you know, like, hey, there's Zulaman, right? Like, hey, there's this 5-man MGT. Hey, there are other 5-mans that you can do. Hey, Karazhan's available. And we're going to nerf the content as it comes so that you have more stuff that's available to you. It might not be that your guild can do Sunwell, but you can do the other aspects of the game. I think that in tandem with the world that works makes more sense than the 10-man, than each raid necessarily being like, oh, here's a regular mode, here's a heroic mode, because it does feel more intuitive, the hard mode of Ulduar, like the fight by fight basis of, hey, I'm interacting with this fight. I'm not turning on a ticker to go from one mode to the other. I'm literally just interacting with the boss. I'm killing KT's heart. And so it's making the boss fight harder. I'm not enlisting the help of Thorim or, you know, the other keepers of Ulduar. And so Yogg is a much more challenging fight. It keeps it in lore. It keeps it in, you know, like immersive in a way that it otherwise isn't. And I think that's just so much more compelling, than the alternative. I really think it's so much more compelling, but I think that it also speaks to, the quality of the listener, even if we're the quality of the listeners and the contributors of this podcast, because, you know, it's not, we don't get, you know, as much as it is an echo chamber largely of more hardcore players, we don't forget the perspective of the casual. I think that a lot of retail players actually, like a lot of retail PvPers specifically, you see this a lot where they cannot see past their own part of the game because they become so truncated. It's become so separated. It's like PvP should be balanced specifically for this, and that. Like, we are trying to look at it from a holistic approach, right? And we're always trying to think of, like, you know, how is this affecting everyone? Because I think that's an important question. And I think that's one that this podcast does really, really well. So I think that we should, you know, as much as I don't want to suck my own dick and everyone else off.
No, please. You first.
Anyway, I will, you know, I definitely will, because we do keep that in mind, and you can keep that in mind. You don't need to be you do need to be a casual player to have their exact perspective, and maybe there's some nuance that we miss sometimes, and there definitely are the nitty-gritty that we do miss. But it's not for a lack of trying, and it's not for a lack of consideration.
Very well said, my friend.
Really Look, to think about.
Let me confirm a few things with New North. Like I said, I didn't really absorb this post as well as I should have because I read it half asleep. Look, Naxx, health pools have been buffed, but outside of that, like, health and damage of monsters have been buffed, but outside of that, I think that's the only thing they've changed with Naxx. Is that right?
And the only thing that they've really announced of changing at all.
Yes.
Really.
But now, did they also say they're considering bringing in extra hard mode challenges to heroics and raids or not?
Yes. So heroics, they've said we plan to add challenges to heroic dungeons as expansion proceeds, which will also provide more valuable rewards. The only other thing that really said they committed to is making it so that 10-player raids have the raid version of emblems, because the emblem system was very different. It changed a lot throughout Wrath. It was very confusing. And so they're committing to the streamlining of it. And part of that is basically, I believe, this is my interpretation of it, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, the heroics will always be, at the start, heroics will be the heroic badge. 10 and 25 Naxx will give the raid badges, right?
All right.
So the heroic badges will be able to purchase lesser tier, like the worst tier, like the bottom of the barrel tier, and then the heroic, the raids will be able to purchase the real tier, in like the higher level gear anyway, like the tiers through tokens anyway. And I believe, like, you can purchase tokens, use tokens for tier anyway. Not really super important, but what they're trying to change is they're trying to make it so that as the heroics progress, so we go to Ulduar. Now Ulduar is dropping, Ulduar badges. It's going to mean heroics are now dropping Naxx badges. We go to TOGC. Heroics are now dropping Ulduar badges so that they stay relevant throughout the expansion, and they've streamlined the system so the heroics stay relevant. And then they want to add these challenge modes to keep people involved in the ecosystem so that it's not just this complete pushover, which I think is interesting. They haven't specified how, but.
You brought up something interesting a little bit earlier when you referenced the Pandaria, like, timed hard modes. That, I think, would be a great solution to giving people a challenge.
I think it's potentially what they're looking at, because we have this thing, Duranosaur brought it up. And I'm not sure if you've touched on it. Like, you're familiar with the weird stuff that they data mined with Naxx, like the weird flavor items that they added?
Yes. Yeah.
So that could be a really cool thing, right? Like adding these weird flavor items and weird cosmetics. Obviously, you don't have transmog in Wrath, but like if you add these weird toys and cosmetics, people love that shit, right? Like people will eat that shit up if you're giving them really, really cool stuff to interact with, you know, be it with a challenge mode. If it's a really cool thing, the Cloud Song Glaive and WoD was so popular. The challenge sets and MoP were so rare, were so cool to, you know, see someone in that full set of gear. So
Extreme.
Yeah. So like that kind of incentive where, and I think, I forgot, is it Arcos or Arcos? Fuck, I'm forgetting his name. But he right, like he brought up the point, and it's very well taken. Different sets of players need different sets of content. And when you start to tailor, if it's not too much work, if you can tailor challenges to those more hardcore players so they can feel, hey, I can show off that I'm so good. And it doesn't need to be the entire game is designed around this. The entire game is designed around my specific mode. It's all balanced around the 20-man mode where I'm going in and every mechanic is near impossible at the first gear level. And then we completely outgear it 3 weeks in, right? Like that kind of dynamic is really odd. But if you can give them modes that are actually, very much sequestered for them, it is interesting then. And they're going to feel more satisfied. They're going to feel better about participating in easier forms of content elsewhere because the holistic experience becomes a lot more seamless, right? They resent the casuals less because they don't feel like it's fucking with their content because they have shit that only they can do, which makes them feel cool, right? And the casuals can still participate in most of what's happening, but they still get this, oh my God, look at that, look at that glaive, look at that full set of, transmog. That's so crazy, right? And then you still get this, like these old school, oh my God, look at that guy in full tier 2 type vibes that they try to preserve, I think, with the MoP challenge modes. And I think that that's such a good interaction and such a good, to truncate the community in that way where people are, they're still accessing the same content, but not everything is, trying to pigeonhole them in the same ways. I think that that's brilliant.
Fuck, I'm going to have to buy you another bottle of tequila sometime, aren't I? Arcos, sorry, go for it, man.
Yeah, can I jump back in here? Yeah, thank you. I agree with your point completely that these trivial toys, the tabards, for example, and the pet toys, like people really love them. I think for Wrath, even if they just copy pasted Mythic Dungeons over to that client, or they might not even need to copy paste it to the client since it's Legion client, but that just increased difficulty for those that want it, that give trivial rewards, that it doesn't give you necessarily power spikes in items, but just tabards, titles, all of that cosmetic stuff. I think that would work perfectly for a lot of people. But on the other hand, the ease of a lot of the content has brought us speedrunning. Like classic speedrunning, that scene was so fun to be a part of and to follow. Like I don't think the only solution is to give hardcore players difficult content and less hardcore players easier content. I think it's also to let them or have this curated experience of difficulty, whether that's for 5-man or raid, doesn't really matter. It should be both. So I think, mythic modes for 5-mans or something similar. Like it doesn't have to be a complete copy paste from retail, but something similar. It would make the 5-man dungeon still relevant, in whatever phase the game is in. The same for raids, but I still think that the speedrunning is a great thing to have come away from the easy content of classic and private servers before it.
Guys,
well, I think that's where they're going to lean, right? Like that, and that's where it started off with the MoP stuff.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, finish this up, then we'll move on to the next point. Anything else?
So I think that's like it's a holistic system, right? Like you don't necessarily, I agree, you don't necessarily have to give people shiny rewards. It might be a few extra badges, but if you give them those timers, you give them that atmosphere where they can compete against themselves, I think it's really useful. And that's what challenge modes were, right? Like it was you had to time all the dungeons, right? Like and people were competing for better and better times, even when they already got all of the cosmetics. People still tried to time them faster because it's just fun. It's good content. Mm-hmm. So I agree completely.
Guys, if we can have a bit of fun. Sorry, go Ryan.
No, I was just saying, those who haven't played MoP before, what North is saying is essentially it's not like Mythics as they are today. It's literally you get a timer on your screen and you have to beat a certain time to get gold, silver, or bronze, and that'll award certain cosmetics. And there's a whole leaderboard that shows whoever got the best on the server, or for all time, or each week reset.
Yep. Can I come in and try and give you guys potentially a different perspective?
Of course.
Stay Safe in the start of TBC decided to do a heroic speedrunning Mythic Plus-like event. All right. And he had a lot of pushback from his own community and other communities saying that, mate, that's not really in the spirit. And the whole thing never went forward. But I just want to point out that ZA is a timed run and does give cosmetic loot if you time the 3 chests. Everyone gets the Amani Warbear, or at least 1 drops per dungeon. So putting that into heroic dungeons, I don't see a problem with. Implementing things like that in Raid could get a little bit sketchy on Blizzard's end. They might not want to do that.
I think we're only saying for dungeons.
Just for heroics. Well, then on that point, let me kick you guys off. On that point, let's have a bit of fun. Anyone jump in with the best ideas here. But if I were to throw the dev hat to you and say, hey, create me some heroic or challenges, or just some hard mode shit for dungeons in Wrath, with certain bosses, what kind of stuff would you be cooking up in the kitchen?
I'd like speedrunning dungeons with hard modes. Like, you increase the hard modes and then you do them quicker and quicker.
I would go down a different route. There is hard modes in retail. Now, mind you, it's definitely gotten a lot easier since back in MOP, but you can go into the dungeon, pull a certain ad onto the boss, and then that has a secret interaction where that ad blows up, becomes big. You have to interrupt, you have to kite, you have to interact with the boss at the same time. So it's adding on a mechanic, not really destroying the dungeon for the other people, the normal groups, because they'll just kill that ad single target and then they'll go to boss after. Something like that, like the spirit of Ulduar hard modes.
Any particular hard mode dungeon you think that would apply well to, or any particular boss you think that would just be a little bit of fun with, Ryan?
Yeah, Old Kingdom, in the last pack before the last boss in Old Kingdom, you can pull those. They do a shadow nova that goes up in the air and comes down and hits everyone. You could do that while you're doing the boss, and the shadow novas could be attacking players. So while the players are in that phase, they have to run from their own mob, their own players that are killing them, the shadowy apparitions, whilst dodging the shadow doodles, if you will.
I can assure you, keep going, mate, because I can assure you, the producers of WoW Classic will be listening to this.
But it's important that the rewards, like North said, are very cosmetic. I was even thinking maybe you could put T-Boos, the epic ring from level 28 back in Classic, all these dead items. You could potentially put them in as loot drops. So you don't want to turn it into a gold farm. So you got to be very careful with how you approach the rewards.
I could see like an additional badge if you complete it on hard mode or something like that.
Joanna, any particular bosses or mechanics that like I said, if I made you a dev for a day and said, design a heroic, I keep saying heroic, like a challenge, a hard mode around a Wrath dungeon or boss, what would you do?
I have never played Wrath.
That's right. Sorry, I keep forgetting. My bad, man.
Oh, you're fine. No, it's one of the funny reasons, or funny tidbits that I'm here and I'm contributing, and I have never played this. And maybe I lend a new pair of eyes to it, because everyone's been talking about how easy Naxx was in Wrath, and I'm like, well, yeah, I hope it's not too easy.
North, let me grab you. First boss in the Nexus, I believe it's called, with the Blood Elf Mage. She splits into 3 personalities of herself.
Mm-hmm.
You follow me?
Yep.
What if you can engage a mode where instead of 3, she spawns 9 copies of herself? Something like that.
That'd be ridiculous. That boss does a lot of damage. But I'm used to it on private servers where, if you don't kick that shit, you're just dead instantly. So that would be more interesting, because it would actually be probably feasible. Because 9x is probably ultimately about, or 3x is probably about what they're doing to those. So it would bring it in line with the more difficult encounters on private servers. So yeah, I don't think that's out of the question at all. You can the thing about these dungeons is you can 3x, 4x, 5x, the damage and the throughput of these fucking mobs, and they're still very killable. So but
that's the thing, North. That
you got a lot of room to work with.
That comes to the heart of the argument.
It's not like Patchwork in Classic, where it's like you 5x Patchwork's damage, and he's now on the moon, okay, and he's just chilling with Elon Musk, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're just fucking dead instantly. But Wrath is a whole different beast. But I think the thing that I would change, where I give him the reins here. And this is the reason why no one can trust me, is that I would turn every single boss fight in the entire game on heroic dungeons just to a weird version of firefighter. Like you walk up to the Blood Elf and you think it's the Blood Elf, but nope, it's Mimron, and like the first part of the Voltron is spawning. And then you go to the next, you go to the Void Boss, and you're like, oh yeah, nice, the Void Boss. And then Mimron hops out of the Void Boss, and he's like, psych, bitch. And the second part of the Voltron is forming. Like that would be my ultimate fantasy.
I just assume you could do that, but with Kael'thas, and he just pops out and he just goes Burning Crusade.
The previous 3 bosses were merely a setback. No, I'd like that. I think that'd be fun.
No, but that's where I think the speed, like perhaps not the speed, but the timer comes in great as well. Because if you were just to add hard modes to, like optional hard modes to every boss in every Falmouth heroic or dungeon, eventually the hard mode isn't that hard anymore. If you're not going quicker, or if you don't have more extra things to add on top of it, eventually it becomes a breeze. So that's why I say like give the players the option to just pick their poison. Like, do you want to do a hard mode run? Sure, do a hard mode run. Do you want to do a timed hard mode run? Sure. Do you want to do a hard mode run X2, X3, X4? But that's kind of where the mythic kind of weave comes into it. But just giving the players the options of picking what difficulty they want to see, like what challenge they want to set before them. I think that's kind of where it comes down to for me.
Yeah, but you have to be careful not to make them feel like they have to do the hardest challenge to get the. No,
of course not. Like, just cosmetic things, titles, badges, tabards, pets, maybe a mount for something that's really, really, really hard. So the mount is like when you see someone on it, that's a baller chat over there, But
and that'll be an issue.
No gear, no weapons, etc.
If I can jump in, that'll be an issue. That's a great point to raise, because it's so hard, because this is like a self-policing thing within the community where, there is input from Blizzard that can curb this behavior as well, obviously. And this is going to be, the details of this will be so key, but making the rewards just so that it doesn't become mandatory for all of these runs. Because like obviously when Zulaman comes out, and, maybe still to this day, I'm not sure, maybe people are over because everyone's got their bear mount. But if you weren't a player that could pull off the timed run, fuck off out of my ZA run is basically the gist of every ad that I saw on servers. It's like timed run, ZA, meta comps, we need this bear. If we don't get it, there will be hell to pay, was kind of the undercurrent of all of the group advertisements. And so you don't want hard mode, exactly like you guys have said, to become the default mode, because if people don't get their rewards, they're going to crack the shits. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but are people on your server really asking like link bear or something like to check if you've done it? Really?
Definitely on me and Josh's server, they're asking people for full tier 6 gear, only ZA. So.
Jesus.
Yep. Happens quite often because people don't want to lose. They don't want to lose the bear.
We were inviting people in blues and greens doing bear runs with 20 minutes left. Like, I don't know, what requirements do you ultimately have?
What weird servers you guys are playing.
Yeah, how much crack do you have to snort to require tier 6 gear in ZA? Or how fucking bad are you at ZA that you need that? Like, you can't, kill the Dragonhawks at the right time. Ooh, spooky.
Welcome to Oceania.
I agree with you, North, but they have the opportunity to find those better players. So why wouldn't they? If there's a large pool and they can just handpick the best because no one wants to create their own group, 90% of us are lazy and we don't do it.
And I do the same thing. I'm a bit of a hypocrite there because, I'll just sitting in trade and I'll be like, hey, come up so I can, you're in chat. Let me inspect you quickly. Okay, there's 8 healers that whispered me. Great. I'm just going to take the most geared one because that's, the most likely one to be successful with. But I'm not the most geared one is going to be like a mix of T5 and like a little bit extra. I'm not going to be I'm like, where is your full tier 6 and Sunwell off pieces for my, no. That's ridiculous. It's just the extent, right? I get the behaviors there. I get people not going to want to take people's blues and greens all the time. You're going to want to take the best gear player. If you have the resources, you're going to do it. But the question is what is the minimum requirement? And I think people are kind of crazy about that. When the content's not that difficult, which is what we're talking about. You want to make it accessible enough so it doesn't have to be, fucking gut-wrenchingly hard that you're excluding all these people. And I agree with that. So you don't want to exclude them from the norm, all the time. That's shit. That's awful, to be honest. But having a baseline, especially with the harder content, it's kind of fine, right? It's a cosmetic reward for the bear anyway. Who cares?
And time will tell.
Have we thought about what happens down the road in heroics? Let's just say Josh is on his hunter, right? He's phase 1 bis, and he goes to do a heroic in Ulduar or in Trial of the Crusade. He's got his priest that now he wants to bring into heroics. But these heroics have been scaled up, so they need to make a toggle, or they need to be aware that if they want to keep heroic dungeons relevant for everyone, they also need to keep it relevant for the alts.
What heroics are introduced in Ulduar? There's one extra dungeon introduced in TOGC, and then the dungeons introduced in fucking ICC are kind of bullshit anyway.
That's right. No, what I meant to say is phrase it like, we're getting stronger over time, and these dungeons are getting weaker. That's why they want to create a scaling, right? They said that we want to make heroics feel good, the whole expansion. That was in their philosophy list.
And I think
what do we have for alts, though?
But that's with challenge modes and stuff. It's not with the base heroics. It's not with the base approach. It might be an extra thing, and they're going to have to pay attention. And I think we're touching on that. They're going to have to pay a lot of attention. If you just make it so it's 3 extra badges, it's going to become the norm. If it's not that much harder, it's going to be like, okay, now there are strict requirements. Now we're not going to let you in because, this becomes a minimum requirement. We want to make sure we get 3 extra badges, and we have to time it to do that. And that's really, that's going to be kind of toxic for sure. But you have to think about it. You have to make it cosmetic. You have to make it about self-leaderboard. You have to make it about self-selecting players so that you're not, right? Like if you remove that content from the pug entirely, if you make it so that it's something that other players can do with their friends that they've already met, and they can still get and find heroic groups. And then you have these as the sort of the post lines out, right? If you have these serendipitous social experiences, if you have this ecosystem where people are trying to group for these heroics and they're actually grouping and they're whispering each other more often than they would with RDF, then you're going to hopefully get into an ecosystem where those are the people that, maybe you find a guild, maybe you find a group of like-minded people, and then you can push those cosmetic extra challenges for fun with your friends that you've just made with these serendipitous unicorn interactions. Pretty based.
All right.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point. They want, you said, they want more interaction between people. A big part of that interaction is saying, no, I'm going to pick this person to play with instead of you, right? Like if you create a group and you get 150 whispers, like you can't really play with all of them. Like some will be denied, right? But if you're, like you said that if you brought an alt, for example, like the content, you don't need to do necessarily the most difficult content. But I remember people were asking, so long as you have, like back in the day in Wrath, people asked, like, if you have this achievement, like on your main character, people will know you're a decent player, right? So just because you're an alt doesn't mean you're excluded either, in my mind at least.
Especially if they're going to bring these heroics, because they're not saying that they want to necessarily or immediately buff the difficulty of these heroics. If it's going to be the case where, hey, I am allowed to get basically 10-player Naxx gear from these heroics, which is what they're currently dealing with the current emblem system. Okay, if it's TOGC, I can get Ulduar gear with these badges. It's not like your alt is going to be in some awful place where the challenge mode is going to be inaccessible to you being a tier behind. It shouldn't be that hard. And if it's like a very specialized, kind of super pushing timers anyway, it's never going to be accessible to alts in the same way that speed runs outside of people who keep alts at cutting edge gear are not accessible to it. It's a form of very specialized player centric, like pushing the limit kind of content. If it ends up there, alts were never in the question anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then the alts are still going to be able to participate in the heroics at large anyway, because it's not going to be that crazy, right? But it depends on how they approach it. I agree.
Guys, I'll move this. Sorry, finish this off, Ryan. Go for it.
Oh, just quickly, would you lift the heroic daily restriction if you were to implement this ever scaling heroic system that you're talking about?
For sure, 100%.
Okay.
All right, guys. 2 big points to finish up with. We'll save the best for last, just before we get to that. Blizzard also actually unveiled the new dungeon tool that they'll be using for Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and we got our first look at not only the UI, the aesthetics of everything, but also a description of how it's going to work. So it wasn't quite the one-to-one copy-paste job of the pre-made group finder that we see in retail. I think there are some small nuanced differences in not only aesthetics but also practical implementation. So, North, I might actually start with you, mate. I was a little bit unsure of exactly what I was looking at. Now, look, North, you obviously hit me up straight away, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, elbow in the ribs of, Josh, you see, the fucking sky isn't falling. And I agree. And I sort of emphasized with you where I was like, look, absolutely, I've been on the show saying I very much so prefer the LFD tool as we knew it to be in the game. I am still pro LFD and all my reasoning, it's been voiced on the show in the past. But whilst I want LFD, it was just a preference. I'm not like, so burnt to the point that I'm like, if it's not LFD, I don't want to fucking know about it. Anything else is trash. I'm not that far gone. And I've said repeatedly through the Discord over the last couple of weeks that I've got no doubt that this tool that they're bringing us is going to be an adequate solution. And I've really lent on that word adequate. I'm sure it's going to be fine. So this is our first look at it. North, what did you think?
It's not that it's adequate. It is the ideal solution. And everyone, no matter what your opinion on this is, I think that the most popular opinion, is one that this is not the optimal approach, that RFD is actually better, that the randomness, the teleportation, that's a better experience. Blizzard, the design team at Blizzard, right, in this giant post that they have made, they have, it's not a middle finger, but it's like hey, listen, right, you think you do, but you don't, right? And I think that they're right. I think that they're 100% right. And let's not mince about it. It is Blizzard telling most of the community they are wrong and that they want to preserve a social experience that goes against their immediate desire to press the button, get the dopamine, RFD. And I think that they are sticking to their guns. They think this is the ideal solution. And I think that, and I mentioned this earlier, we should laud that. They have core design philosophies that they're sharing with us, that they're saying, hey, listen, the feedback is good. We like the feedback, but we have to eventually put down the foot on this. We're not going to change this, at least now, not until we see what happens, because we think this is the better solution. And I agree with them. The UI looks clean, right? They're letting rogues queue up as healers if they want to. It's really weird, but who cares? They're letting solo listings go. Hopefully, if the community is good about reporting these kinds of people, I'm sure there'll be add-ons to filter out the gold booster, the boosters that will inevitably come up, but we're also removing boosting, right? So, maybe it's going to be a lot of selling runs for sure, but, hopefully there's add-ons to kind of counter that thing. You can't really mess with that in retail either, and RFD doesn't, really encounter that problem, but you have this emphasis on the world that's preserved with the non-RFD tool. You have the world as the main character. You have these potential serendipitous interactions between people where more people are talking, right? More people are interacting, more people are out in the world together, right? As they're trying to balance these servers around each other. So I think you want to look at the holistic approach on this, and you have to ultimately, I think the only thing that you're left with is the admission that, hey, listen, right? Maybe I don't think that this is the right thing. Maybe I don't think this is what I'm going to immediately enjoy the most, but Blizzard has to see out their vision. They do, because they haven't done it for years. They haven't, actually stuck to their guns and be like, no, this is so amazing, and then done a good job with it. They've tried to at some things, and they've really, really failed with like Titan forging and weird things that they've stuck to in retail. And they've really, some of the borrowed power initiatives, they've really, double, triple down on those things sometimes, and then being wishy-washy with them. But here we see a consistent design philosophy. It's been communicated clearly to us. They're doubling down on what it is, and they're trying their best to explain, hey, this is the reason why we're going against most of the community. And, color me an optimist. They're right. I really think that they're right. And I really think that people should be open to trying to see what their perspective is, because it's not one that hates you. It's not one that's trying to squeeze the most money out of you. These are the engineers. These are the designers. These are the people who care, and they want it to be good.
Mate, I'll throw it to you other guys in a second. I just want to catch Bullfed. Oh my God, my dogs. One sec, guys. Okay. Sorry about that. I want to catch you while you're on a roll, North, on that point. Just clarify for me. I think you and I talked about this. Is it the case that, so this one has, postings that you can list as an individual, and I think the pre-made group finder in retail doesn't have that. Is that right?
Does not. So you have to look through for your own groups, whereas this you can,
I think that's
you
brilliant.
can look through. So it's much easier to just find people to just randomly invite. So it's very Very streamlined. Also, no item level. It doesn't show your item level. Maybe people make add-ons, but I think the Blizzard will probably, in all likelihood, if anyone's trying to use that API, if anyone's interacting with that in the same way that they tried to early on in Classic, when there was like essentially like they were trying to find a group finding tool, they removed that API. I imagine they'll do the same exact thing if people start putting gear score in. If people start putting, Classic parses and building in like a Raider.io equivalent in Classic, I imagine they'll fucking axe it, because that seems in line with they're trying to, make it approachable and familiar and preserve those social experiences.
Here's a stupid suggestion that you please, open invitation to call me a fucking idiot. Along those lines, North, if you are trying to pass out that, semi like toxic elitism in terms of, only certain gear scores and eye levels or whatever are allowed in my dungeon group, I guess it'd be too hard to police and it would just be creating them more work, which they would never do this. But, you could technically make it a rule, like, do a TOS thing where you say, look, when you create an ad, yes, you can create text in your ad saying, we're doing this, we're looking for that. But, if you mention eye level or gear score, that's against terms of service. That will never be done, because I know it seems like a preposterous suggestion, but if they were really leaning in on this, we're about the community and non-toxicity and blah, 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 that's something you could do, but they just don't have the resources to police it with reports.
I mean, they do have the resources. They're not willing to spend the resources policing the reports. Yes. I agree. And it'll never happen because of that, which is unfortunate to just, blanket say, okay, they can't police the community because of this. That being said, I think people would find ways around that anyway. I think that it's, like as much as it is like people would commonly find ways around that. Yeah. If they really want to check your gear, they're going to check your gear. And I think that that's fine. But, if you make it easier for them, right? It's an accessibility thing. If you make it super, super easy for them to check gear, they're going to do it all the time. They're going to make it baseline. We don't want it to be baseline. We don't want people to be excluded regularly because of how the system works. And so long as you can prevent it from being a regular thing, if it's possible, sure, you're doing it around the world, like a world tour, doing every single fucking heroic. For sure. I'm going to inspect the people that I invite, because I'm about to launch on a 5-hour adventure, and I want people to be geared. I want to have the right comp, etc. But if I'm just throwing a group together for Violet Hold, I'm literally just sitting $1 on and I just want to enter it in with random fuckers. It's not going to be, especially because the content's so easy that it ain't that deep. It doesn't run that deep. It's really not going to be like that. And we can encourage each other to be better about that, because it's not at all necessary. Okay. And we can just be better.
All you other guys, regardless of whether you're pro or anti, random dungeon finder, we've had those discussions on the show already, purely focusing in on the first look at this tool that we are getting. How do you feel about it? First in, best dressed.
Okay, so RFD is dead. We accepted that. We know that. They've done the nail in the coffin. The pro for this LFG tool for me is it's a much more refined experience for people targeting certain dungeons and certain content. They don't have to read through loads of bulletin board spam and it timing out, and then they get back to the computer and they miss it because they've got the timer set to 1 minute or 2 minutes. But in saying that, you potentially have bored players who just don't want to raid log. They want to log into the game each day if they've got their free time, and they see a random post in the LFG chat and go, oh yeah, I'll do that. I don't need it, but yeah, I'll just do it for a bit of fun. So it takes away from those players a bit. And then the big negative for me is you still cannot get a group as the undesirables. Examples of Rogue and Warriors trying to get into heroic MGT for the Shard. So that problem still exists, where people will only take meta because they can still see the certain classes and specs that sign up. So where LFD would have alleviated that.
Okay, Joanna, Arcos. Yep.
In looking for group, like the text channel, even though you've listed in the tool, but whether someone bothers to do that remains to be seen, I guess. But regarding the tool itself, I think it's an improvement over what was in actual Wrath. I'm still on the fence whether it should be cross-realm or realm-based. I don't think they've said which one it will be.
Well, this would have to be realm-based, wouldn't it?
I have no idea whether it needs to be
because there's no teleport to the dungeon.
They don't have
philosophy.
sharding. Yeah. They don't have sharding. They don't have the tools are not currently, they exist, but they're not implemented. You cannot join someone's group and then enter into their instance together. If it were an RFD tool, that would be easier to do because they would just do the same as BGs, and it already works with BGs. But it would be, right now it is realm specific. So yeah.
I'm fine with that, to be honest. Like,
I'm also fine with that.
Back in the day, I felt it it took away a lot from the experience playing with people you would probably never see again because they're on a different server. I don't know. I mostly do dungeons with guild, so like I haven't really given much thought to the way it is, like the bad things about this. You know?
I also don't see, and please feel free to correct me again if I'm just obviously missing something, but I don't see what is the player who wants to just log on and then obviously he can't just like random find a dungeon, but like the player just wants to log on and help. You know, like he's just still going to be able to just look at whatever dungeon is available. No, he's not going to be able to enter a random tool and sit in dollar on. Sure, but he can just look through the dungeons and help anyway. Like it doesn't, nothing really fundamentally changes for that experience other than it's slightly longer for him, but like he's trying to help anyway. He's just trying to pass the time. Why does it matter if he has to, you know, fly on a flight path for 2 minutes? I don't see how that's really taking away from him. I see how it takes away from the undesirables, but I also don't really think that the undesirables here are a target demographic that needs to be brought up. I think that the rogues and the warriors of the world, if they're targeting a specific piece of loot from something, should, you know, have to make their own group if that's what they want to do. If they want it to be specific to that, right? Like, because yes, people will exclude you. People will make their own groups to try and find specific pieces of item. I don't think that that's a bad thing. Right? Like, it's a bad thing if it's really common and really exclusionary because, you know, the Shroud of Contempt is just such a weirdly powerful thing in like a very oddly placed, you know, dungeon. And like everyone needs it. And it's really kind of gross because it's like a bunch of non-support classes. So like that sucks. Like that's a very weird sort of coalescing of different dumb bullshit that occurs in TBC, but like generally speaking, I don't think that's that big of an issue.
Yeah. Look, just to finish up on this one, I don't have a major drama with traveling to the dungeon, even though I prefer the teleport. I don't have a huge issue with, you know, mounting up and going there. My big thing with this has just been like, with this tool, you know, whilst it might decrease toxicity, which is a good thing and goes towards their point of, you know, basically building a stronger social environment. I don't think it buffs interactivity and player communication in any way, shape or form. Now, look, we'll have to wait and see. I just don't think that pushing this out there is like, this is the bandage that will, you know, tie the community together and keep you guys talking to each other in dungeons. I don't see this helping in any way.
I don't think it's a bandage in any way because like a lot of dungeons people still, like even with the systems we have now, people don't like talk that much. You know, like it just depends on the group.
Exactly.
It's just trying to increase the proclivity for repeat interactions and these repeat serendipitous interactions. They talked about this and I really want to sort of try and hark back to that because, you know, it is actually a real thing. Like you start to see some of the same people, especially if it's intra-server. It's not just random. So you don't have different communities meshing as well because like, for instance, Faralina, very toxic server. Exceptionally toxic server. If you have RFD and you just have those mixing, you have the Grobulus players now RFDing with, you know, with Faralina players, that feels really bad because they're going to be toxic and they're like, they approach the game in like a fundamentally different way where it's like not community based and like the servers are completely so different in that way, like in actual just like living interactions between players. Whereas you have this preserved where it's, you know, it's less about the teleport and more about how players are interacting with each other and not necessarily, okay, this is going to be the bandage, this is going to be the thing that fixes it, but this is going to preserve the likelihood that you have these unicorn interactions, that you have these serendipitous sort of situations in which you have emergent social connections with people who are like-minded. And I think that that's worth trying to do. It's not some panacea or whatever, but you know, it's not a bad change either. It's a game of inches and this is an inch in the right direction.
All right. Speaking of inches, let's go. Oh, sorry. Go, Ryan. You go, mate.
So I think, let's make an example. If you're on Farlene and you say it's a very toxic server, or there are many toxic people there. Let's say you use this tool and you get into a group and then you read the group chat and it's just very toxic, whatever that may be. I think with this tool, the barrier for you to just say, you know what, I can't be asked to play with these people. I'm going to leave the group and find a new one is way lower than it is now, where if you leave the group, you need to open the LFG bulletin board and on a large server, like it's hard to sift through that to find a new group. But with this tool, you can just leave the group and instantly you can apply to a new one, like in a matter of seconds. So I think this will save a lot of people the hassle of getting out of toxic groups and into new ones.
All right, guys, I don't want to get too bogged down in the sort of RDF type chat. We'll move on to the big and best point. I've saved the best for last really here. And thank you, Arcos. You saved everyone from a bad dick joke there as I was talking about inches. But look, here we go, guys. Beta. It's here. It arrived. And I'm so happy because I went to bed last night and the last thing I said in the Discord before I went to sleep was I laid out some predictions for dates. And I said, all right, here's, I said about 2 months ago, October 4 was circled on my calendar as my prediction for Wrath release date. But then last night, just before I went to bed, I said, all right, here's how I see it going. And the first thing I said was, in all honesty, I see beta coming either today or like I said tomorrow, because it was yesterday for me when I'm recording this. I said I can see it coming tomorrow or on this day next week. And then I wake up and fucking beta's been dropped. So I felt like a big old brain. So that was very nice. So beta is here. The invite waves are going out. Look, some of you might have it. Some of you might not have it. I don't have it. There's a lot of people that don't have it right now that you would have thought might be in there, but they're not. It's, just random waves of influencers and non-influencers are playing the game as we speak. So I think that's really cool. We're in that period now. In saying that, it just to flow back into my timeline argument a little bit, I was sort of saying basically, beta this week. And then what I'm expecting personally is, that August 9th date that Blizzard floated out in their blue post about when the servers are being amalgamated, the dead servers are being closed down. I'd said that I'm now looking to that August 9 date as being the day that, the experience buff gets implemented. And, then I could see, basically, pre-patch coming on the 6th of September, followed by launch on the 4th of October. That's my personal guess. And again, guys, I don't have any fucking inside information. Please, it is a completely incorrect take to think, Josh does this podcast, like he talks to people from Blizzard. North will attest to this. They don't say a fucking thing. They are brick walls. So this is just informed guessing basically on the projected timeline. But beta, guys, first in best dressed. Who's excited? What's the go?
I'll go with, beta will last until middle of August. Then we'll get pre-patch. No, wait, sorry. Like you said on the Discord, 9th of August. I think that's a good time for the pre-patch.
Well, I said that's when the buff's coming in. I think pre-patch is coming later than that.
I think the launch will be the first week of September, so that they get 3 weeks of active people before the quarter ends.
Yep.
In order for the launch to be the beginning of September, then the pre-patch needs to start early August, I think. Because I think they'll go 3 to 4 weeks of pre-patch, and that would be in line, like the first and 1.5 weeks of August for the pre-patch.
I agree with you, Arcos, and I've mentioned this again in the Discord. I've gone, look, in my mind, it's one of two dates. It's October 4 or September 6, that first Tuesday of September or that first Tuesday of October. And it all comes down to flipping a coin on whether Blizzard cares about, really driving Q3 home or opening up Q4 with a bang. And we can't say as to what their plans are. You other guys, how do you feel about beta just dropping, today? And, did you get it? Did you not get it? Do you hope to get it? What do you think about how this affects the timeline?
I don't have it. Not surprising to me. I was also one of those people who guessed that we would have it before the end of June. So when it dropped today, a part of me was like, yes, I called it. The other part of me was like, I just spent 3 hours dissecting all of these blue posts and all of this news and making a video on it. And then like 10 minutes later, they dropped beta. So I guess I'm just already out of date.
That's how it works, right? In the content game.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that August 9th date is the pre-patch. And I think that we're probably going to get that's early September actual Wrath launch. That's been my guess for a while now. Either way, I think we're just going to see it in the fall. I don't think it makes a massive difference for anybody in particular. I don't know how much or like how exciting the beta is going to be. I think that a lot of people who got into the TBC beta thought that it was going to be this crazy experience like the classic beta was. Not. And it's really not. As someone who I didn't get to do the original classic beta, and then I got to do the TBC beta, and I was super hyped and excited, and people just sort of like, they played it for a few weeks. And then like people that were really interested in testing specific things continued to use it and give feedback. But it's one of those things I could, they'll keep adding more and more players to it. And as more streamers get into it, they're going to try to hype up the beta. But ultimately, I don't think that it's going to, I think that more people are going to be interested in getting all of their TBC ducks in a row, but instead of like trying to get into the beta. Like in the next few weeks, beta, I think, is going to just be seen as, just another thing that, could take up your time and not some like super hyped, important thing to be a part of.
I think that's a great point. My hype is set to low, absolutely, for the Wrath beta. I am not bursting out of the gate to do anything substantial in this thing. If, and I shouldn't talk with the presumption that I'm getting in. That's if I get in. The content creators in the Blizzard Discord have been told that at some stage over the next 2 weeks, we'll basically get there, but just not necessarily on day one. So maybe one day I'll get there, but like, I'm not concerned. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't even know how much beta I'm going to play. Traditionally, classic beta and TBC beta, I did not play a lot of it, which is why I've always been very, critical in a way, because I say that there are people that definitely, it's hard when it's random, but there are people that get invited to these things. It's one of two approaches to a beta. Is this for testing or is this for marketing? Or obviously you've got the third option where you say, Josh, it's for both. Look, I very much so get the impression that these things are, yes, tests get done. I'm sure things get acted on, but this is a marketing thing first and foremost in my mind. And so, there are people that get invited like me, which it's fun and all. I don't want to sound like, I'm not grateful, but, I'm not a fucking good tester. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm the last person that should be invited to these things. And there are people that will be so much better than me that miss out, which is really sad. And I hate to see it, but, I don't know, how else you would do it. I'm rambling a little bit. North, how about you?
Normally, this is the kind of thing that I'm really interested in because I'm, hardcore dungeon tester, this whole, pushing to be first, fast to try and clear the raids quickly. But, not really excited for this beta. Excited to see where it goes, excited to see where these design philosophies lead them because I think it's, I think they've gone down a good path. And if they really, seize on these sort of design pillars and really trying to knack some of this stuff, I'd be really happy to play Wrath, but in terms of beta, I'm not gonna go spam dungeons. I'm not gonna, there was at one point we're gonna try and get double Apollyon warriors and, roll up on the scene, spamming Bladestorm in dungeons to try and push for first, this and that, get the server first titles, blah, blah, blah. Probably not gonna do that. I've been focusing on, I've been just tearing through cookbooks, just trying to teach myself more and more. I'm trying to produce this YouTube channel.
That's the way.
This cooking YouTube channel. We're going to try and open a food truck soon. So I've just been trying to focus on that. I've been trying to find a QA job at that I'm looking at openings at for like intro roles at like Intrepid and Riot. And
I think of you all the
Blizzard,
time,
if you're listening, if you want to hire me, I'd be a tester.
I think of you all the
classic.
time.
Look at me, I'm reformed.
Your day is coming, mate. Your day is coming.
Maybe, so I'm more focused on those kinds of things, but I really, and that's why like I'm not in the content creator Discord anymore because I don't, I'm not a content creator. But I'm happy that I'm in the Discord that you and I share with some of the devs and some of the QA workers, et cetera, and some of the designers because, that's the thing that I enjoy the most. I really enjoy just thinking and really trying to solve the problems that, some of these games have and try and really be conscious about the design sort of necessary to enact, this really, really positive vision because, I've always been more interested in escapism than I think the world itself and the escapism that MMOs offer. So, it's always just been probably the biggest passion that I've had. So, Blizzard, if you're listening,
Well, no, I'm going to double down on
North
that.
2234, you can.
No, fuck it. I mean, we crassly sort of sit here and joke, North, about, sucking our own dicks and whatnot. But if you'll allow me to fillet you sort of, digitally for a second.
As is tradition.
As is tradition. Mate, I completely agree with you. And I really, look, sorry if this is going to make people cringe, but, like we said, I do know that there are staff members on the Classic team that listen to this podcast. And, not to call you out, that's not what I'm saying, but to call to action a little bit, where I'm like, if you've listened to North for 1 second on this show, and I know you do, how you could sit there and not hire this man and not think that he would be an absolute asset to what you are doing, whether you're on the Classic WoW team or whether you work at Blizzard or whether you work for another video game company, working and developing an MMO. Fucking hire this guy. He's, it kills me. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, I've said it. Away from North, all you other guys, any final thoughts on beta? We've been going for 3 hours, guys. You have been brilliant. I cannot thank you enough. Anyone have anything else to say about beta, or have we pretty much covered it?
Yeah, I'll second that. High North. This beta, although is nothing but a publicity stunt. Any non-NDA, so non-disclosure, like you can't stream it. Any one of these betas is pure publicity. And it annoys me because there's things that I really want to test. I want to get into Naxx and I want to test Gluth. See if you can kite those ads with this change, the one that nerfs mages and paladins. See if you can, there's a bunch of things that we need to test, and they're going to slowly roll it out in terms of viewer count. Yeah, we get that. But when do we get the bulk, the testing? Like that needs to be as soon as possible. I'm sorry if it takes away from the hype, but yeah.
The good thing about the TBC beta, and the thing that they actually did, which was very different from the Classic beta, as it's important to remember, it's important not to forget these things. The Classic beta was way more pure marketing than the TBC beta. And 100%. Yeah, okay, the initial phases here are going to be, but like Classic for so long was only available to content creators. I had to sell my goddamn soul to get into that thing, right? Because it was like the pinnacle for content creation. At the time, a lot of people, and they're not wrong to point this out, there was some cool, unique metas going on with the level gating in those, and like people doing like all the world PvP. Like it was a really, really fun environment to actually be in. And it was mostly a publicity thing. Like it was almost all exclusively a publicity thing, right? Like they didn't really fix a lot of the issues. They actually, in my mind, the raid XP problem was introduced as a result of the beta testing, which was really dumb.
Yeah, so
testing how to. I'm trying to get hired by Blizzard, and I'm calling this testing. Anyway, let's backtrack that really quick. No, listen to this. But no. But the thing that but in TBC they invited so many more people, and so many more bugs got fixed. Like the mage regen bug would innervate. Innervate was like stacking with itself like multiplicatively, which is really silly. And so you're getting like 4K ticks just like out of nowhere from mages on Innervate, which was absurd. And you had all these like little issues that were, like pretty ubiquitous. And they slowly got solved, and they let more and more people in, to the point where like when beta was at its, like at the end, pretty much everyone had it. I don't remember a single person in my guild who didn't have it. Right? Everyone who wanted it had it at the end. Hopefully they can do the same thing here, because, it really should be an all hands on deck thing. I do think it's mostly a marketing thing, and I don't think that's wrong or bad or evil. But they do, to say that it's not a bug fixing thing, I think would be a bit of an unnecessary slight to the QA team, which does a fantastic job of trying to solicit feedback during these periods, and did a really great job in TBC. And I expect the same work in Wrath, if not better, because the trajectory of the team has only gotten better. I think that they've come into their own. It does fill me with a lot of pride to see, this change to the some changes to the, hey, we're willing to stick to our guns. Hey, we're going to give you these design philosophies. Yeah, it might go against what you immediately want. Yeah, we might have to force ourselves into a, you think you do, but you don't type situation. But they're only doing that because they're serious. They care, and they, on some level, they know what the fuck they're talking about, right? Or they're at least willing to make that gamble, and they're willing to stick to their guns enough to do that kind of thing. We haven't had that in years. We haven't had that in years because they haven't been able to do that, right? They were dead silent for a very long time, and they weren't willing to change things as quickly as they needed to, or, even get their hands, like in the guts of the game and really rearrange them. And that's where we're at now. They're willing, right? Like they have their hands are fucking dirty. They're fucking, they're elbow deep in the guts of the game. And goddamn if I'm not fucking happy about it.
Beautifully said. What a great note to go out on. Look, guys, 3 hours later, you have been phenomenal. I have been going this long because you have been on fire. As I've said, you know I mean it. You guys are the lifeblood of this show. You are the lifeblood of the community. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time out and doing all this today. Let's go down the list and say thank you to everyone. Arcos, mate, we're supposed to record again about Firemore in 7 hours time. Can I mercifully ask for a push to that date? I'm going to be fucked. Is that okay? Thank you so much for being on the show, mate.
Yeah, it's 2 a.m. here. I think waking up for me in 6 hours might not be ideal to get on another show. So yeah, we'll figure another time.
Too easy.
Yeah,
mate, shout out whoever you want to shout out.
No, I think just shouting you out for all the effort you put into this show, to bringing it to us and have varying voices with you each time. And yeah, just thank you for that.
I really appreciate that, Matt. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'll DM you after this and we'll figure out a new date to do the Firemore chat. Tyrannosaur, mate, like I said, no need to be coy. You are always welcome here. I love you like a son, mate. Say whatever you like. You've got the stage, mate.
I mean, I am on YouTube. I'm on Twitch. It's all Tyrannosaur search stuff. But yeah, just another big shout out to you, Josh, because as someone who is trying to stay on top of the news lately and get into the whole, like, let's talk about Classic WoW's news and updates and things like that. It's made me admire what you have done over the past, what is it now, like 4 years, that much more. So, you are setting an exemplary example, and I appreciate you having me on to be a part of it.
Thank you, mate. It's not for the faint of heart, is it?
Oh, no, not at all.
Ryan, stop this madness. Shout yourself out or something, please.
I've got a YouTube channel, but it's not monetized. I just do it for fun, so I wouldn't put that on other people. I didn't get a chance to talk about the OCE Fresh and what happens to Yojamba if OCE get a Fresh, so that's fine.
Go, mention it.
Maybe another time. Okay, so basically in Oceanic we've got 3 servers, essentially. They just axed the 4th. So we've got 2 PvP ones and then a PvE. So we don't have the player base to support a Fresh over 5,000. And if they did, see you later, Yojamba, and Arugul becomes Yojamba level of population. So it's very tricky. We get 250 MS lag when we play on US West, and we get 290 on average when we play on the East Coast of US. So it's very hard for us. It's not like we can just go and jump over there and, get used to all our abilities not queuing up correctly and the lag, and it does put a lot of people off. So it's a very tricky situation for us in terms of looking at a Fresh run.
It is, mate. Are you on Yojamba?
I'm on Arugul.
Oh, okay. Because I've recently converted to Yojamba, and yeah, my spicy take, and you seem to be, subscribe to what I'm saying as well, is like, it's such a difficult situation with Oceania, and it seems so like I'm shouting out like a heretic to say, Fresh would be almost bad for our region of the world. But yeah, I'm really concerned about what it would do to Yojamba. And, yeah. It's a tough spot for Blizzard when considering our part of the world, for sure. I don't think easy decisions, come with all of this stuff. But mate, look, what's your YouTube channel? Let people, find it.
It's just Nogs WoW. I just did a Slave Pens video, 9 months ago, which is now completely obsolete. And I'm kind of happy, honestly, that they burnt mage farming. I just hope, like North said, they give the shotgun to the Paladin and keep it consistent with rogues and their instance farm and whatnot. So yeah.
Very good. And
thanks for having me on, Josh. I've been watching you I was doing Uber Eats about 4 years ago, and I was listening to you and Ale on the podcast talking about Classic WoW. So, and then of course North with his PvP videos prior to Classic release. So,
and here we all are, older and wiser and a little bit uglier. I love it. So everyone, that's NOGS WoW. Please go look him up on YouTube and say g'day. And last but not least, the absolute man of the moment, who's been holding court as always in this podcast, as he does in every one that he's in, who I'm imploring someone in the fucking industry to throw him a paycheck. North, thank you so much again, brother.
It's a privilege. It's a privilege, and I cherish the moments that I get to spend. I haven't always been as clear. I haven't always been as civil. The first time that we interacted, maybe I shouldn't, really talk about it that often, but I was a rambling, at times very incoherent, very strung out, 22-year-old that, just had a lot of passion and was often erratic, often judgmental, often angry, often rash. And, I think growing with the show has been such a privilege, and getting to interact with you and the thoughtful people that you bring on the show, and the thoughtful people that really surround this community. I don't know. You guys criticize Blizzard for the fucking fluff takes on this developer update, and I bring a lot of that too. But it really, from the bottom of my heart, I mean what I say, and it is such a privilege, and I'm really grateful for it.
You sweetheart. Have we bullied you into streaming again yet, or what?
Yeah. It depends on what happens in Wrath. If Wrath is really looking good, like, I'll probably throw in some streams, but I've actually just set up my computers, as I was talking at the beginning of the show, my computers, one got lost and one got destroyed. Like, I'm on a temporary one because UPS hates me, I guess. So, but all the audio stuff, it's set up in the back room. Probably more daytime streams, probably something that works better, if I get this YouTube channel, that I'm making for my stepmom, for cooking. If I really get that off the ground, with like a podcast that's sort of, designed with it, I want to dedicate probably like 3 days a week to streaming, maybe not that long. But, I really would like to get back into it. I'm feeling much healthier than I used to. The past, 3 or 4 months have given me, really like a new lease on life. It's
I can hear
stuff,
it.
But,
I can hear it in your voice.
I don't feel the heaviness that I felt, for the past, 7 years. I felt very, very heavy, and I don't, I got some experimental therapy done in Minneapolis, and I feel very light.
Good.
And I really want to share that with people, because the air feels clear, the water feels, tastier, everything just feels better. And I just want to be with people. So, yeah.
I'm glad. And we want to be with you, mate. So look forward to more in the future. Everyone, thank you so much. And I shall talk to you later.